For over a decade, I made an annual pilgrimage to Joshua Tree National Park in Southern California. This would have been spring of 1999. No smartphones, no Wi-Fi, no MapQuest. At that time, the roads in the park were largely sand and unpaved. There was no water in the park, and you needed to fill up at whatever entrance that you were at. I don't recall ever seeing a manned park ranger booth during any of my time there. I did climb a loop through Utah's Canyonlands, though, Zion and Arches, and then Joshua Tree, so I had an annual pass. Not that anyone was really checking, though. There was construction going on in the park at the time. They were improving some roads, and there was some more signage for the campgrounds that had been there before. We had a construction crew with a trailer a few spots away from us. I don't remember what campground that we were at, but maybe Ryan or Jumbo Rocks or something like that. We had a favorite spot, though, that had a cave in the back of the site. A great place to cool down in the afternoon heat and to seek shelter during the occasional rain or snow that sometimes hit before dawn. Now, let me just say that the desert, it really attracts weirdos. People seeking to get detached from civilization, I guess, or running from problems, maybe. In fact, Charles Manson's ranch wasn't actually that far from here. Many bodies had been buried out here as well, and we frequently met out fellow campers and had communal dinners with those that we met. We quickly met a guy named Chris from Virginia, maybe West Virginia if I recall correctly. He had been living in the campground for a while and riding his bike, don't ask me how, to do a job that he had a diner in one of the park's entrances at. I don't remember if it was 29 Palms or Joshua Tree, but it was one of them. Chris was an environmental activist and was not pleased with the park improvements. He would wax on how they shouldn't be making the park more accessible and had even vandalized some of the signage. I didn't agree with his actions, but I did understand the sentiment. We also met a very mentally ill woman who had been living at the end of the cul-de-sac of the campground. She had, shrines to something set up everywhere and empty bottles hanging from trees, some odd decorations that she had created with wire and trash. I remember that she was sort of wild-eyed, dark-haired, and very antisocial. She talked in word salads and to herself non-stop. We just avoided her, really. There was a white or cream Toyota wagon with Delaware plates next to the woman, though. The car was packed full of banker's boxes, and clearly someone had been living out of that car. It was an odd sight, as the roads were just sand, and even with my Subaru, some roads were pretty tough to get through. The owner of the Toyota wagon was a guy. His name started with D, or had a D, but that has been lost with time, and so maybe it was Darren or possibly Andrew, I guess, but I've searched online for any trace of what I expect happened with him, but I just never found a thing. Anyway, D was odd, to say the least. He was a businessman and dressed business casual, but his demeanor was just off. I was a therapist at the time, and I immediately got bad vibes from this guy. His story was that he had gotten a divorce and was doing some self-exploration. I didn't buy it, not for one bit. He oozed abusive and sociopath. He came to our campsite with Chris and stayed long beyond his welcome. My climber partner was an aspiring actress, largely theater, and was a social butterfly. D would turn any questions asked back to us, a common way to change the narrative. My friend loved the attention, though, and answered where she lived, worked, went to school, etc. I was honestly horrified by this, and sat quietly trying to memorize everything about D. We later developed a bit of a safe word after this event, though. D, though, was practically drooling over my friend, and she was welcoming it too, and sharing far too much. D finally left camp, and we had already invited him to spaghetti dinner the next night with Chris. The next day, we didn't see Chris at all, though. No worries, maybe he was working. That evening I cooked dinner and my friend went to get Chris to join us. His camp was set up but empty. His bike was there. Dee came over for dinner and we asked if he had actually seen Chris. He told us that Chris told him to meet him later that night off of one of the jeep trails deep in the desert. I don't remember which trail now, but it was a well-known one, deep in the desert, and we had encountered a jeep stuck out there a few days before. It really wasn't passable, and definitely we couldn't walk there. So I agreed to drive us out there after dinner. Dee was hyper-focused on my friend once more, and even though we had the "he's weird, don't give him your personal details" talk, she was definitely happy to have the attention. We had dinner though, and then we headed out to see Chris. I was driving, friend in the passenger seat, Dee behind her. Dee had a backpack on his lap, and I had a terrible feeling that there was a gun in it. We got to the remote location Dee said Chris was going to meet us at. No Chris though, no anyone. We were also 2+ hours from the nearest town now. Dee said, "This is the place, we need to get out and hike to Chris." And it was here that my gut was telling me that if I left my car, I was dead. I kept imagining Dee pulling a gun to my friend's head and making me get out of the car to my death. It was pitch black out too. The stars were the only light. I told Dee that we were not getting out. He was welcome to, but I was heading back to camp. Dee was angry. I told him that he could leave the vehicle, but he didn't, and the drive back was silent. Dee was furious and I was terrified. Back at camp, still no Chris. Dee wanted to sit around the fire though, and I said that I was going to bed. My friend joined me and very quietly we had a conversation of what had transpired. She agreed though that Dee was dangerous and also felt like he was going to pull a gun out of that backpack too. We discussed driving back into J Tree or 29 Palms and going to the police, but what would we tell them? I had long purple dreads, a friend had bright red hair, we were early 20s, clearly countercultural, and presenting to a military conservative town police force would likely result in us being dismissed or worse, maybe even detained. We talked about going to talk to the construction crew who was loudly drinking and playing poker, but again, 2 early 20s girls alone in the desert, it could go very bad for us. We agreed to sleep in my blacked out Subaru wagon that night instead. I carried a large machete that I had brought back from the jungle trip that I'd been on before. It was sharp, but a pretty clumsy weapon if I'm being honest. My Subaru windows were so dark that any time that I strayed east of California on the I-10, I was pulled over and cited. In fact, it happened at least 5 times every year on our treks across Arizona and all that, especially Texas. I don't think either of us slept well that night, but my friend had previously told Dee that our next trip was going to be Carlsbad Caverns, and Dee was allegedly going to meet us there. Well, when we got up, we quickly found Dee in our sight. "Where were you guys?" he asked. "I checked your tent." My blood instantly ran cold. We told him that we slept in the cave behind our site that night. We asked him if he had seen Chris, but no. We were quickly packing up our camp to get the heck away from Dee, and Dee told us that he would meet us at Carlsbad. But my friend and I, we had already changed plans to hit Mesa Verde instead. We checked Chris's site before we left camp, but there was no Chris. His bike was still parked where it had been, but he was nowhere to be seen. In an act of desperation, we asked the wild-eyed lady if she had seen him anywhere. She said not for a few days, and so we left and we headed east. Now, I truly believe that it's possible that Dee actually killed Chris and was planning on killing us. I don't have any evidence for this, obviously, but I have not seen Chris ever since that moment. I've searched online in so many ways trying to find anything on D or what he was running from. I actually took down his license plate number and full name in my journal, but I just never found a thing. I do hope, though, that whatever D was running from, that it eventually caught up to him. I am a long-distance hiker. I've hiked the entire JMT twice in both directions. I've hiked many miles of the Pacific Crest Trail, as well as numerous random trips in my time in the outdoors. I have probably maybe a year of collective time sleeping outside in the wilderness, and have hiked over 2,000 miles collectively at a minimum. I have only managed to encounter 2 bears, some coyotes. I have smelled a mountain lion once, and even heard one chirping near me. I'm not a big believer in cryptids or anything and such, but I do have a story that honestly makes me question that a bit. You see, in 2022, I hiked the Muir Trail in the Sierra Nevada in California. It is a long-distance hiking trail that spans 211 miles from Yosemite Valley to Mount Whitney and takes about a month to complete. The trail is remote and located in some of the most amazing untouched nature that the country has to offer. I hiked the previous trails in a tradition southbound direction, and in 2022, I hiked the trail northbound towards Yosemite with my wife and female friend of ours. This story is on that 2022 trip. So one day, about halfway through our trip, when the afternoon was getting ready to end, we decided to camp in a place called Grouse Meadows. The previous year I enjoyed fishing here, and the gentle river that curves back and forth through the meadow, it makes for a really nice place to swim and filter water from. We started to make camp for the night, and I noticed a large buck about 10 yards from us staring at us. It then started approaching, and I started to yell at it just to, shoo it away. It circled around us a bit and left from us down the way that we had come from. I decided that I was going to catch a few fish before the sun went down, and who knows, maybe we could have some fish tacos for the night. The girls agreed and said that they would finish making camp while I was off. We split a 3-person tent, so it was pretty easy. Anyway, as I went down toward the small river in the meadow, there was a large rock near where we were camping, and it was about the size of, I would say, a 2-car garage, and about that tall as well, large enough that you definitely couldn't see over it. Now, when I passed it, I noticed a young man walking around it in my direction. I was surprised by that because by this time most people are already getting camp ready, as it gets pretty cold and dark fast in this Sierra. I was also a bit confused on where the heck that he had even come from, as he was not on the trail. He was just sort of walking straight through a meadow with a river running through it, away from any trail. As he got closer, I noticed that he was only wearing a small day pack, blue running shorts, and a white t-shirt, all completely clean. That may not sound that strange, but when you're multiple days away from any trailhead that leads out of the mountain, it definitely is a bit strange. I was kind of walking away from him toward the river, but it seemed like he was following me, so I stopped and said, "Hey man, how's it going?" He replied, "Hello," in a very plain and sort of monotone voice. He then said to me in the same voice, "What are you doing?" I replied, "Well, I'm about to go fishing," as if it wasn't obvious that I have a rod and a reel in my hand. He didn't laugh though. As he kept following, he said, "What will you do with the fish?" I said, "If it's big enough and not pregnant, I'm going to eat it." At this point, I stopped by a little beach on the side of the river, and he passed by me, and I felt a bit of relief. He seemed a bit off to me, I guess, but then just when he was about 20 feet past me, He stopped and turned around along the beach and squatted down and just watched me fishing. Eventually, I pulled one in, and it was a pretty good size, and I prepared to clean it, and just as I pulled the guts out of the fish, he said, "How does it taste?" And I looked over at him, waiting to hear a joke or something, and he was just smiling. A terrible feeling suddenly came over me, like that hair on the back of your neck type of feeling, just standing up. I said, "Well, I have to clean it first, man, and cook it and all." I said it in a way that would have come off to normal people as, "Okay, I'm done talking to you, it's time to go" type of way. I stuck my knife in the sand in front of me, and I didn't put it away this time. The man, after a while, said, "I'm hiking 30 miles today." And I said, "That's nice, man, have fun." And he just stood up and walked off into the meadow towards a tree line, not on or near any trail, and just sort of vanished into the woods. I went back to camp, and I didn't really say anything to the girls because I didn't want to scare them. The night came in and we ate and we went to bed, and honestly, I mostly forgot about it. But then I wake up. Well, actually, I felt woken up is probably a better way to say it. I noticed both girls sitting up, and my wife said, "There's something there." I was so tired that I just said, "No, there isn't. Go back to bed, guys." I laid down, and so did the girls, and within seconds heard a very fast shuffling sound, and immediately I sat up, and so did the girls. I said, "Oh yeah, there's definitely something there." So I use a sort of small foam sitting mat outside of my inner tent in the vestibule for shoes at night and to sit on during the day. And I saw it moving, and could even feel it moving, which meant that something was literally right outside of my tent. I grabbed my headlamp and our bear spray, and with my heart exploding out of my chest, I zipped open the tent ready to battle whatever was out there. But when I did, there was nothing. Not even a distant sound. It was dead silent. Like ear-ringing silent, in fact. Maybe a squirrel or something? Or maybe that buck that I saw earlier? I said. We laid down, and this ended up happening like 7 more times. And every time that I went out, there was nothing. Eventually, I started to actually pass out because of just how exhausted I was, and I only really remember cursing at it as I fell asleep. I woke up again and looked over, and both my wife and friend were asleep. I heard the sound again, and I got ready with my bear spray and worked up my courage once more. I zipped open the tent, and there he was, about 15 feet away. The same guy on all fours in an almost push-up-like position, staring directly at me with that same face. It was completely silent, and then he crawled backwards into the dark with a speed that it's hard to explain. Then, all I remember is that I woke up. I was so relieved that it was a dream, and in the morning I told them that I had dreamed that there was something at the tent, and they looked at me like I was joking. Our friend said, "Yeah, that wasn't a dream." My heart sank. I said, "Well, what about the guy?" And they said, "What guy?" Obviously, I didn't tell them about the guy down at the river, so they couldn't know if it was real or not, or just a dream that he had visited the tent. But they also recalled not understanding why they fell asleep so fast when something was outside, and they felt like there was a sort of blank in their memory before falling to sleep, which is a bit weird. We all agreed that there was a general feeling that was off in this place. I don't really tell people this story too because I know how crazy it sounds, that it sounds stupid and fake. It even sounds that way to myself when I talk about it. But I do know one thing. I will never be sleeping in that meadow ever again. So I'm hoping to get some feedback on something unusual that I experienced a few years ago. I've always been a bit skeptical of paranormal phenomena, but this encounter has always stayed with me. I want to share what happened and see if anybody else has had a similar experience or can offer at least any insights. So, this happened when I was 16. It was around 7 to 8 p.m. and I was in my fully lit bedroom scrolling through Instagram. I was awake and fully aware of my surroundings when suddenly my alarm clock turned on by itself and started playing a Cake by the Ocean. A random detail, I know, but I remember feeling a bit uneasy at that moment, like something was off in the room, like I wasn't alone. I looked up and there, right next to my alarm clock, was what I can only describe as a humanoid entity. It wasn't solid, but rather it seemed to be sort of made of light. The light was bending in a way that formed the shape of a person. Arms, legs, head, torso, but no fine features. It was almost like a distortion of light, kind of like a heat mirage is the best way to describe it. The room also seemed a little bit more brighter than normal, almost like the entity was somehow affecting the electricity or the environment or something. I remember feeling terrified, but also knowing that whatever it was there clear as day. My eyes started watering and I couldn't speak. I ended up slowly backing out of the room, closing the door and running upstairs to get my dad, and when we went back down, it was gone. I've never experienced anything like this. I know some might chalk it up to just a vivid imagination or something psychological, but it felt real. My mum also mentioned that I had an imaginary friend when I was little, and she had a psychic once even mention it. That has always stuck with me a bit, and now I'm wondering if there's any sort of connection to what I saw all those years later. I'm curious to see if anybody else here has had any similar encounters with a light-based or energy entity like this, or if you have any insights into what I might have experienced. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. So I don't know about you guys, but I like keeping my money where I can see it. Unfortunately, traditional big wireless carriers also seem to like keeping my money too. And after years of overpaying for wireless, I finally got fed up from crazy high wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks that actually cost more in the long run, and switched to Mint Mobile. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month. I personally saved a little over $600 a year using Mint Mobile. So if you like your money, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/bescared. That's mintmobile.com/bescared. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. So last year, I took my friend and my bonus kiddo, his child, to view the Perseid meteor showers at a remote mountaintop horse camp deep in the wilderness. There was no cell phone reception, no power lines up there, just quiet and very dark skies. Even though it was late summer and hot as heck out there, the camp was empty. It's a large 100 acres or so camp, and there was not a single human or even a horse in sight. and that was odd. We pulled out our camp chairs, though, and set up at the top of a large sloping meadow, bordered by some scrubby pine, but a perfect outdoor auditorium for the Pasades. Kiddo was 11 and had never been that deep in the wilderness. Neither parent was into the outdoors. He was freaked out by bugs and prospect of creepy crawlies that he could not see, but I've taken his father into the wilderness many times, and we had just been collecting sage on my native res. And while we were sitting in our chairs, I noticed that all of the bug chatter just suddenly stopped. It was suddenly just dead silent. My blood ran cold and I got goosebumps at this. A deer-like animal appeared slowly out of the side of the meadow near the bottom. I say deer, but its neck was far too long, and not at the right angle either, like it was a puppet and being moved in jerky motions. The animal made eye contact though and stayed there watching us, occasionally taking a few steps closer, but not close enough to see it clearly or close enough that I felt threatened. I had my binoculars in my car, but really didn't want to see whatever it was pretending to be a deer, and I think that it was letting us know that we were on its land. It was grazing, and its giraffe neck with the weird angles reminded me of the large puppets used in native ceremonies that mimic nature sometimes. I stayed calm, even though I was terrified, and the bug or the night noises, they just never returned. I did catch a few amazing views that night, but I kept my eye closely on that deer until we left. It was only when we were safe at home and Kiddo was tucked into bed that I did share my thoughts with my buddy. So I'm Native American and collect sage on our res in a beautiful river gorge. I took the same buddy from the last story from the Pasade shower, and we ended up high on a primitive road miles from the highway overlooking said gorge. It was already dark, but there was a warm wind coming off the river. He had never been on native land before, and I told him that we thank the earth and ask permission before taking her bounties. Cheesy, maybe, but I'm not taking chances and am always respectful. He's so white though that he's practically translucent. I call him Alabaster as a bit of a joke, but he's always been respectful about native customs and all that, so we get along. We kept hearing what sounded like tiny rabbits in the scrubby sagebrush all around us. There was some scrubby brush and trees that were dense and maybe 15 feet high. We were on res land, not where houses were though, and I thought maybe someone let their horses or livestock graze, as there was a large metal trough right there that we were hearing the small animal chatter from. This chitter was high-pitched and sounded really adorable, to be honest. It was at night and in the pitch dark, but the sound really didn't bother us. Anyway, my buddy wandered near the trough that was set off of the primitive road and in the scrubby trees, not really accessible to livestock or horses or anything. It was surrounded by sage and brush, but looked brand new and sort of shiny, I guess, which was a bit weird. But when my buddy got closer, something very large, larger than his 6'2" frame, came loudly crashing through that brush. We heard branches and brush snapping like a large wild animal was charging through there. We couldn't see anything. To be honest, nor did I want to, but I did my signature round 'em up whistle. And yes, I'm aware that whistling at night isn't really that good, but we scurried to the car quickly, apologized to whatever it was that we had disturbed, and quickly left the area. So I volunteered with a search and rescue group, and we were frequently dispatched to remote areas looking for missing people, recoveries, and occasionally even a crime scene search. We were called out one day after a logging company had unearthed a backpack belonging to a man who had been missing for over 20 years. The initial search for the man had been massive as well. Hundreds of people, dogs, a massive community effort, and nothing was ever really found. Not a single clue, in fact. It took us over an hour to crawl our team on unmaintained logging roads. The area had wild horses, which I had never even heard of in our area. What I mean is that it was really remote. From the jump as well, we had some really weird technical issues. My teammate's brand new Dodge truck stalled out on the logging road. I carry a litany of tools, jumper cables, tow ropes, etc., and the Dodge was just dead. I don't remember if we towed it to the side or what we did, but there was just really no fixing the issue. I mean, the truck just wouldn't even turn on. No lights, no electrical, but the battery was fine, which was really weird. Anyway, my rig's fog lights suddenly went out as well, and they never came back on. I chalked it up to extremely rough terrain knocking them loose, but a handful of us who were first on the scene descended through the Devil's Club hillside and immediately found one shoe, then another, a few pieces of clothing as we get further down the creek at the bottom. We found a mandible and then the top part of the skull within the first 10 to 15 minutes. The clothing, it matched the description of the missing man on the flyers that we had been given. One of my teammates sat down for a break and picked up a rib that was next to him. We had been up and down the hill that he sat on and hadn't even noticed the human ribs that were scattered up the hillside. And that was really odd. We were all trained to grid search and had done so. Had we merely overlooked 5+ ribs that were laying plainly on the ground? Well, maybe. It was Devil's Club and brutal landscape after all. Plus, the clothing and the bones were out in the open, so anything could have happened to them over those years. Our old maps from the original search, though, showed that this area was searched. And I mean, it does happen. Maybe the guy was on the move and these weren't here during the initial search. I drove out of the scene to grab a sheriff who was going to guard the scene overnight. We had flagged every fork that we took with flagging tape as the logging roads were not marked. They were missing the number sign as well that usually sat at every fork, and they were definitely not well maintained. We were at least an hour off of any paved road at this stage, and I had noticed the direction that we took at every fork on the way in, right, left, etc. I was thankful that I had as well, because it was then that I noticed that our flagging markers were gone. I usually stayed out at sites overnight as I didn't have children at the time. I chose not to stay at this site though because, well, I guess it just felt a bit off to me. On another search for a lost hunter, we stumbled across hanging figures in the trees, made of twigs, moss, and lashed together with all sorts of tall grass or vines, straight up Blair Witch style. This would have been a few years after Blair Witch Project came out, so I don't know, maybe somebody was LARPing or something. The team was used to seeing weird stuff in the woods, but these were definitely unsettling. We camped overnight at that spot as we hadn't found the person. We slept in a circle with a small campfire in the middle. It was fall headed into winter, and so it was cold that night. We just had sleep sacks and bivy sacks, no tents or tarps or anything. And when we woke up, there was a small bundle of twigs lashed together with vines by our fire. We initially blamed our team clown who was always pulling pranks, but the look on his face told us that it wasn't him. We have no clue what or who it was, and we never did find out if it was a prank or not, but something tells me that it wasn't. Many of the old-timers swore that they had seen or heard or smelled Bigfoot out there as well. These were pretty tough men. Many had military or law enforcement experience even, and they weren't the kind of guys to get scared by much, but when they spoke about it, you could definitely tell that it got to them, at least a little bit. This has been going on for maybe 3 to 5 years at this point. I didn't think too much of it since it was always in the corner of my eyes whenever I was reading or watching TV or just trying to sleep or whatever. But within the 2 years in the 5, I noticed that I had seen a person, I guess you could say, a lot more. Whenever I'm alone now, though, I can feel something behind me or standing by me. I'm feeling it more in public even, but I thought that it was just myself being jumpy or something like that. Last year before November, I was waking up to shapes on my walls. They look like Viking runes as they glow within the morning light. I hardly see them anymore as much, but when I do, they always appear like glowing in the dark stars on my walls. Anyway, on Saturday, March 2nd, I saw this person that I always see in the peripheral of my vision more clearly for the first time. At first, I thought that it was my brother checking on me, but he doesn't own a red mask or a grey hoodie with words on them. I immediately went into the bathroom to talk to him, since our bathroom has 2 doors to our bedrooms on each side, to see that it was empty. I told my mum about it as she thinks that I was asleep when that happened, but I can assure you that I wasn't asleep or tired or anything. And then today at 10 a.m. I saw it again, peeking through my front door to the hallway of my upstairs. The person was now in all red as they closed the door without making a noise like before. I saw their eyes, all wide as their pupils were black. I felt myself panicking, but I acted like I didn't notice it, even though I was looking directly at it. The body, though, was all red as it wasn't clothes anymore like before. I don't know what the heck I'm seeing, but whatever it is, it's getting closer with better vision of that thing, and that is definitely freaking me out. So, that's why I'm here. If you guys have any idea as to what this is or what I should do about it, then please do let me know. So, I know that this is going to sound impossible, but I found pictures on my phone of myself at 12:52 a.m., and I can assure you that I did not take them. I was in the kitchen just trying to heat up some food when I woke up not too long ago in the morning and I checked my phone. I was looking for something in the gallery and I found 2 pictures of myself from last night in the kitchen, and the angle that the pictures were taken was by the kitchen bar. Now, there was nothing behind the phone to support it from that angle, like at all. I remember I placed the phone by the kitchen bar, but even if that was the case, it's still not possible that those pictures were taken because someone had to tap the phone to take the pictures. Also, my phone is new and it's never lagged at all or anything. There was no one home, I was the only one there. I only had my cat and she was in my room. And the whole thing is just really creepy. Obviously, I checked my apartment and did everything possible to find the truth behind this. I mean, possibly it could have been an intruder or something. But that's just not the case at all, and really I have no logical explanation, nothing to solve this. I came to the conclusion that this must 100% be paranormal activity of some sort. I came to the conclusion that this must be 100% a paranormal activity of some sort, especially after trying to recreate the angle like the pictures. My phone had to be definitely up in the air like that and tilted to the right a little bit. Something paranormal is definitely messing with me, and if anyone knows what kind of entity that might be able to do something like this, then please do let me know. So I'm mostly telling this story because it was just so mind-boggling that I cannot resist the urge to tell somebody about it, anyone who will listen. So this happened in either 2008 or 2009, but in order to understand the story, you need a little bit of background, so bear with me. My sister Sharon has severe nonverbal autism. She's 4 years older than me, and at that time, I would have been maybe 19 or 20, and I didn't have a stable living situation. But at the time of the story, I was living with my friend and his girlfriend, Darlene, in their 1-bedroom apartment. I slept on one of the couches in the living room for a couple of $100 a month, and there were 2 couches that formed a right angle in front of the TV. Now, my sister had a day program that she would go to on the weekdays while my mum worked. But the only problem was the program opened at the time that my mum needed to be at work, so she would drop my sister off wherever I was living, and I would watch her until a bus from the program would come to pick her up. This happened every single weekday. One morning, though, I woke up kind of delirious and looked over to the other couch, and there was my sister just sort of sitting there staring at me. She didn't look unusual or creepy. She was just sitting where she normally would and just sort of watching me. It's not uncommon for me to wake up in a sort of half-waking, half-sleep state where I kind of hallucinate, so when I saw her, I didn't really react and I just went right back to sleep. When I woke up later, I went about my day as normal. Some friends came to hang out. Darlene was in college and had an early morning class. She came home later that day and asked me why my sister was there that morning because it was a Saturday, a day Sharon wouldn't be there. This obviously confused me, and Darlene said when she was leaving to go to school, she saw my sister on the couch watching me sleep. Now, there was no way for her to know about what I saw because it wasn't of any importance to me at that time, so I just didn't tell anyone about it. The first thing that I thought was that, well, maybe my mum got confused about what day it was and maybe she dropped her off at my house but later realized what she did and came back to get her before I woke up. So I called my mum, but she told me that her and Sharon had been there all morning. It was incredibly bizarre to say the least, and to this day I'm still not sure how the heck to explain it. It never happened again, mind you, and I still don't know what happened, but the whole thing is just really, really eerie. So I live in an old farmhouse that was built in 1860, and I moved in many, many years ago. I was only about 12 years old when we moved in, but when my mother told me that I was sleeping upstairs, I immediately got an unsettling feeling without even knowing anything about the house. So I got all of my stuff up there and I slept up here. After about 2 years, I started feeling very uncomfortable in my own room and feeling like I wasn't welcome at exactly 11 o'clock every night. I've even had friends come over that I haven't said anything about this to them, and around 11 o'clock, without failure, every single one of them has said that they want to leave my room. This started about 2 years ago, and I originally had just put it out of my mind and tried to ignore it. But after about 6 months of it, I went to sleep and woke up to an old woman standing over my head. I blinked, I waved my hands in front of me, and she was just standing over my face, staring. I watched her, terrified, fade out of existence over a few minutes with a terrible smile. I didn't go into my room for weeks after that, and then about 3 weeks later, the weird energy was just gone. So I was fine sleeping up there for about 1.5 years, and then the weird feeling at 11 o'clock started every night, all over again. I started burning sage as soon as I would feel weird, and this has always helped. And then going downstairs to sleep on the couch. Flashback though to about a week ago, and I got that weird feeling. I started burning sage, and immediately my sage just would not burn no matter how hard I tried. Then it went up in a huge flame and blew out in the opposite direction of my breath, and I watched the flame go up to the side, so I went downstairs, and the entire night I just saw something peeking around the corner by my stairwell. And the fact that I was still seeing things downstairs really worries me because I've always gone down there to get away from the bad energy. Well, this has been going on since then, and anytime I look out of my peripheral vision, I see an all-black figure of a person just staring at me. I guess I'm just trying to get some advice on, what to do because I feel like things are escalating and I just don't know how to go about fixing it before everything goes too far. And for anybody that's wondering why I don't sleep upstairs, it's because whenever I get that feeling, I'm terrified that I'm going to wake up to that old woman standing over my face again. So I choose to just sleep on the couch to make sure that I don't have to go through that again. That experience was truly traumatizing, and I would do anything to stay away from whatever that was. So back in 2004 or 2005 or something like that, my girlfriend and I were driving around, and I decided to go to the Honda dealership in town to look at motorcycles. This was completely random and totally spur of the moment. Also, social media didn't exist at this stage, and there was just no way nobody knew that we were going to be going there. Anyway, we walk in, and there's this short, older-looking black dude who looks like he's in kind of an argument with the salesman. The salesman is literally trying to get this dude to leave, and like a second or two after we walk in, the old black dude, not an Always Sunny reference, but anyway, he turns around, stares right at my girlfriend and I, proceeds to totally ignore the salesman as though he isn't even there. He walks right up to her and I, introduces himself as Ramses, knows my name, knows my girlfriend's name, and remember, there's no social media back then, knows about us, and starts to tell me about my grandpa and his war history. He shakes my hand again and leaves. Apparently, all he wanted to do was meet me. Also, he looked older, but he had the eyes of a way younger dude. Honest as well, I promise you that I'm not making this up, and I'm just as confused as you are about it. And apparently, that dude had been waiting there for me to show up. He allegedly knew that I was going to be there. He knew who I was, he knew my girlfriend, he knew my grandpa, he even knew his war history. My girlfriend and I both had our minds blown. We go home, I tell my mum, and she tells my sister. My sister calls me on my flip phone, and she's all spooked too. A lot of weird stuff in my family going back since I was born, so when stuff like this happens, it can sort of mess with us, but nobody in my family will deny any of it. Even if my grandpa somehow knew this guy, which I highly doubt, there's no way that he would have known my girlfriend. I mean, my grandpa never even met her, not once, had no idea that she even existed, didn't talk to that side of the family, not even one iota for who knows, until I started talking to my dad again in 2022 or so. Now, here's what I think. Here's the mainly feasible options. And yes, that's where I'm at in my life, since I know that this is all real, and so I have to start finding explanations for all of it. And when stuff gets really weird, you have to start thinking outside of the box a little bit, right? Anyway, one possibility is that it was an angel. And this lines up with another, maybe even crazier story with another old black dude named Eli. I'll have to share that story another time because it changed my life, but the second is that it was some sort of time travel thing or something. And the third is something outside of all of this. This one could also lead us back to the angel, but like I said, this is obviously all sort of crazy and I'm just theorizing here. But what do you think? That dude was there waiting for me and he knew me. In fact, he knew things that he shouldn't have known. My house was haunted ever since it was built, and so I theorized that it wasn't the house, but instead that it was the land. It was a pretty big property, around 40,000 square feet, and around it were just fields. In the radius of around 1 kilometer, there was no population there either. There were about maybe 6 to 7 people who worked on our property full-time to maintain it, and every single one of them had a story to tell, let me tell you. So, when the house was being built, construction workers used to see this weird animal who looked like a rabbit. When they went to catch it though, it would turn into a rapper and fly away into the air and just sort of vanish. Yes, that's how they described it, like a rapper. That animal would suddenly turn into an object, though, and it would just vanish. This story as well had been told to me about 3 different times by 3 different people over the years, all of them not knowing each other. When me and my siblings were little, my mother used to hear jingling of anklets at night. My father was always away on business trips, and helpers were not allowed inside the residential properties, so we used to be alone. Which means that there was nobody inside the house, and the jingling sounds and the sounds of people running around in the lounge were always heard. Things took a major turn, though, when we grew a bit older. Like one time a maid suddenly came over to my mother and asked her, "Yes, ma'am, what is it?" My mother gave her a very confused look, and she said to her, "You called for me," but my mother never did. She then said, "You were standing on the stairs staring at me, and when I asked, 'Do you want anything, ma'am?' you just gestured to me with your hand to come to you. I completed my work, and so I'm here." When my mother told her that nobody had called her and that I was in my room the whole time, her face literally turned pale. Another time I was alone in my room and I heard a door opening and then closing. Imagine those door closers that have the door closer on them and they are made of wood. They make a big sound when they're closed. I hope you know what I'm talking about, but when I heard it, I went downstairs to check and the door was closed and everything was normal. I thought that maybe it was the air or something, which is a bit sus because air cannot open a wooden door, but that was just me coping, I guess. I closed all the windows shut so that there was no air coming from anywhere, and I went back up. And the moment that I was on my last step, I again heard that sound of the door opening and then closing. And it was now that I was beginning to realize that this might be some sort of jinn or demonic type thing. I just stood there for like a minute, but again I went downstairs anyway. I was in the middle of the stairs and I saw that the door was just hanging in between, like not closed and not open either. That was impossible, as that door had a door closer on it, and who the heck opened it? All the other doors and the windows were locked too, and there was no humans around apart from myself, and also definitely no air anymore. So I just sort of stood there a bit frozen, taken aback. I looked at the door for like 5 seconds, and then it closed itself suddenly with a huge bang, like a person just slammed the door. Well, that was enough for me. I ran upstairs and increased the volume of the TV so that I wouldn't hear it any longer, and just tried to ignore it. On another occasion, I was awoken by a large banging sound, like somebody was banging on the door very hard. The sound was coming from the lounge, which was a bit far from my room, but it was around 2 or 3 in the morning maybe, and I went to check it out. I was genuinely surprised too that nobody else was awake or seemed to be hearing this. I mean, the sound was very loud, but I tried not to think about it too much, thinking that they must just be in a deep sleep. When I reached the door though, I was completely in shock. The sound was coming from behind the door, as if somebody was banging on it, but as loud as the sound was, the door wasn't vibrating or moving or anything. It was still. Again, I stood there thinking, what the heck is happening? I was convinced that it was a thief at first or something, so I peeked through the window that was beside the door, and there was no one and nothing there. The sound was still coming, but there was no one behind the door, and it was a really, really strange experience. But as I told you, we were experiencing these things since even childhood, so I just turned and I went back to my room to go to sleep. There was also this one thing too that used to happen pretty regularly as well. Whenever one of us was sleeping alone in a room at night, we used to always feel as if something was pulling the toe on our feet. I swear as well that this happened so many times that I just eventually lost count. Another thing that usually happened to my mother, though, was that she was slapped on her leg. Even if we were in the room, she would just sort of wake up and angrily ask, "Did you just slap me?" I would always sit there clueless as to what she was talking about, and then we would both give each other that knowing look and just sort of go back to sleep or go back to our work or whatever. And the most strange part is that I used to get these dreams about strange types of darkness lingering in our house. One could say that my mind was just playing tricks on me, but hear me out first. So one time I had a dream that there were a bunch of children between the ages of 3 to 6 sitting on our lawn eating raw meat. The kids' clothes and bodies were very dirty, and they were just devouring the meat that they had in their hands. I woke up feeling a bit weird, but I didn't say anything. I went to the lawn to get some fresh air, and I saw that there was a trash bag there, randomly just sort of seemingly placed there. I didn't give it too much thought, and I went back to the main lounge to eat some breakfast. Now, as I was eating, my mother came to me looking a bit uncomfortable, I guess, and told me that when she woke up, she found a cluster of meat on our lawn. Take a bunch of meat and press it tightly together, that's what this looked like. That's when I told her about my dream, and both of us just sort of sat there, speechless, really. Anyway, this is getting pretty long, so I'll leave it there for now, but I lived in that house for 13 years before eventually moving to another city, and upon moving, nothing else has ever happened. I was 22 years old when this happened. So I worked in a grocery store which had been featured in the news. You could see me in the clip and it was clear where I worked. I had just came back from vacation and a co-worker told me that some guy had been coming around every day for a week asking for me. When I asked who or why, they told me that they had no idea, but he was around my age and seemed a little bit off to them. Well, a few hours passed by and my co-worker came and told me that the guy was back again, asking for me. His name was James. In the back room, we had a computer, and you could see all the camera footage from all over the place. I looked and didn't recognize who James was, but decided to go and ask what he wanted anyway. When I went to meet him, he was clearly drunk and said that he had seen me on TV and wanted to ask me out. I replied with, I'm sorry, but I'm actually in a relationship, even though I was single. I said that I needed to get back to work, and he asked me if he should come with me or not. I was confused by this and said that I'm working. He then left, but I could see him through the cameras outside the store, just drinking. A few hours passed by and he was still waiting for me outside, so I had to use another exit when I left. The next day I came to work and I saw him waiting for me outside the store. He had a huge smile on his face and he immediately walked up to me. He was really shy and didn't say a word until I said hey while passing by to get into the store. He followed me inside and said that he needed to talk. I asked him what was up and he said, how about we go to the movies? He was really creepy and I replied, look, I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend, remember? As I was walking away, he started following me and asked if he could come help me with my work. No thanks, I replied. Once again, I looked at the camera footage and yet again, he was waiting for me outside. At this point, I started asking a male co-worker to escort me safely to my tram every night when my shift ended. I started getting really scared once this had been going on for a while, and he clearly wouldn't leave me alone. I asked my brother if he could drive me to work on his motorcycle and hug me outside of my workplace, so it looked like he was my boyfriend, and James would maybe leave me alone finally. Since I knew that he was somewhere watching and waiting for me to get to work. It didn't help though. I started getting these messages like, "Is that your boyfriend? And he doesn't need to know if we go out, you know." I was confused about how he had even gotten my number in the first place. I asked all of my co-workers, and a new one said that she'd apparently given my number because he had said that he is a friend of mine. I was angry about that. At this point, I asked my male co-workers to throw him out if he ever came back, which was a lot. A couple of weeks went by without any harassment, and I finally thought that he had left me alone. But boy, was I wrong. I came to work one day and was in the changing room and heard that we have a new co-worker and that it's his first day. I didn't think anything of it and proceeded to change my clothes. Once I got out of my changing room, my jaw literally hit the floor. Another co-worker said, "Hey, this is James." I looked in horror as she asked me what was wrong. I said, "I know, this creep has been the one stalking me for weeks," as James smiled. I went and searched for my boss to ask him what the heck. My boss said that he had no idea that this was my stalker and kind of laughed it off as no big deal. I told him that either he leaves or I will. He said that I wouldn't have to work the same shift as James and he couldn't fire him. He lied though. You see, I had a lot of shifts with him, and wherever I went, he followed without saying a word. He just kept following me. I would often have my lunch break by the computer so that I could at least see where he was, and every day I could see him just staring at me behind me as I ate. We had cameras there too. This went on for a while. He would text me every day, but at work he didn't say anything, just stared at me. My boss finally understood though what a freak James was and that he didn't actually do any work, just stalking, and started to think of ideas of how to fire him. One time I noticed James was clearly drunk at work, and so I told my boss and he got fired. And this is when the stalking, well, as far as I know, finally stopped. This is my account of the only real scary occurrence that I've had in my life. It was mid-October, 1992. I was riding home on my motorcycle from seeing some friends. It was late in the evening, early morning hours of that chilly fall weekend in Central California. I had made my turn off of the county freeway onto a less than well-lit country road. I remember that the road ahead was deserted, no headlights coming towards me, nor any taillights in my rearview mirrors. The road was encompassed though with large walnut groves on each side. The huge trees and the land swallowed the distance ahead in complete darkness. I was clipping along at about maybe 50 miles per hour when my eyes caught the jogger up ahead of me, on my right side. My mind quickly thought, how odd, wondering why someone would be out here jogging at this time of the year, at this hour of the night. As I approached him, I gradually moved to the middle of the road to give the jogger some space. I touched on my bright so that he could see me approaching. Now, understand this. At first, in my mind, there was nothing out of the ordinary, other than the timing of the situation. A hooded runner, heather grey sweats, a figure about 6 feet tall, jogging along the shoulder of a deserted country road at midnight in October. A bit strange, yeah, but really, who am I to judge? Anyway, as I approached him at a safe distance of maybe 100 feet away, bright headlight blazing, I saw him. Or perhaps I should say, it stumble. I fully expected the figure to fall, sprawling face down into the plowed dirt, but it didn't. It fell to the ground on all fours, but very quickly and with amazing agility, it began running like an animal on all fours, like a wild animal. Mind you, I was riding at a regular speed at this point, maybe 55 miles per hour, but the hooded human form that I'd watched become a hooded animal was keeping pace with me for a moment. Then, as if it sensed that it had been discovered, it sped off to its right into the pitch-black walnut grove. Instantly, my blood ran cold. I downshifted out of instinct and throttled hard, and honestly, I was gone. All I could think of at that split second was that thing, that animal, might suddenly pop up in my rearview mirror with some horrific, maniacal, grimaced face right before ending me. Before I knew it, I was driving 5 miles down the road and my speedometer read 100 miles per hour. And just before I made my final right turn towards home, I got my courage up to look into my rear view, but there was nothing. There was just the pitch-black night behind me. Whatever it was now gone. Shakingly, I made my last turn, and I didn't look back again until I pulled into my garage and I closed the door. To this day, now 30 years later, I can tell this story, and my listeners will react with either complete disbelief, some believe me, and others are not sure. But what really was it? A person, an animal, a shapeshifter, a skinwalker or something? Or maybe a combination of all those. I'll let you decide for yourself. This was on the last day of June 30th to be exact. My stepdad worked at a motorcycle shop next to the Native American res that we were nearby. This particular day, me and my mum had to go and help him at work, because they were moving to a different building to somewhere about a mile away. My stepdad told me a story about something that had happened there one time, paranormal-wise, and I've always believed in the paranormal, so I was sort of curious, I guess. Ever since I was little, I've heard voices and stuff, seen things that weren't really there, or things would fly across my room and stuff like that. So my stepdad had told me that one time he was there. He was exhausted from the summer heat and had been working all day. He was feeling a little bit vulnerable, according to his words. That's when demons come out to get you. And he said that he was talking to my mum, and the next thing that he knew, he was leaving the building. But what had happened was he had actually choked my mum out, almost killed her, in fact. She had a broken nose, choke marks, and honestly, I've known this man for a long time, and this is just completely unlike him. My stepdad was never scrawny, like at all, but he was maybe about 160 pounds, 5'8"-ish. My mum was like 5'11" and 245 pounds. 2 other people saw this happen, and they both attested to the fact that his eyes went completely black, and his whole demeanor just suddenly changed. He eventually overpowered whatever this thing was and dropped her, leaving the place on his motorcycle immediately. And once he crossed the bridge away from the Native American res, he had to pull to the corner because he felt really sick and puked up this like black goo, as he described it. He went over to the cop that was at the other corner and asked if he had seen him, and the cop said no, he never even heard the motorcycle. So, that's my dad's story, but this night it was my turn to have an experience that secured my belief in the incident that happened and in the paranormal. So the night was normal. It was about 9 p.m. and I was going to Walmart, a little bit away with my mum to get some food since everybody was hungry. We got to said Walmart, but we actually had the dog in the car with us, and so my mum decided to stay in the car with him while I went in with her phone to get some groceries. I went into the store, and obviously I'm looking for the stuff. I was about to call my stepdad on my mum's phone. I didn't have a phone at the time since I wasn't old enough yet, and call my stepdad to see what kind of flavor of yogurt that he wanted. But he called me, and I answered the phone and I hear, "Hi," and I said, "Hey, good thing you called me. I was just about to call to see what kind of yogurt." It was cut off by "hi, hi, hi" over and over again. I was like, "Hello?" And all I got was "hey" and "hi," and then the phone just hung up. That was a bit weird, and definitely freaked me out a bit. I called him back and was like, "What did you do that for?" And he was like, "What? What do you need? I was on the phone with my boss." And my heart instantly sank. I told him what happened, and he told me not to worry, but I was worried. He said to get whatever I had to, so I hurried and got the food and I left. I went out and told my mum what happened, and she said to just ignore it too. I was getting in the car and we were about to leave, and a message came through on her phone. "What's your name, little one?" with a bunch of scribble and random numbers and signs and things. I then said, "What the heck?" and I started saying, "Stop, Dad, this isn't funny." We got there and I confronted him, and he said that he didn't know what I was even talking about, and he just sort of blew it off again. Me and my mum were going into his room to unstock the shelves of all the nuts and the bolts and screws and tape and all that sort of small stuff, but the lighting in this room was insanely bright and the music was louder in there than all the others. It was too much for me for a bit, and I got really nauseous all of a sudden. My mum was directing me to leave. As I said, she's like 5'11", and I was about 5'3"-ish at the time, so she's a little bit taller, but she had her arm over my shoulder and opening the door, and as I turned, I saw an almost 6-foot black shadow figure of a man, and I hear, "Get out." And me and my mum, we instantly ran. I felt really sick all of a sudden, and it was hard to breathe, and it was hot as heck outside. But we ran and told my dad, and even he looked a little bit scared. I was absolutely terrified by all of this. Me and my mum and dad all had to go lock up the merch room, and I was the one who had to go unlock the door. And I felt sick, but my stepdad and mum were too chicken to do it, so I had to. I went over and was locking the door, and I hear Joe in an almost little girl sing-song voice, and I instantly froze. I looked back, and so did my mother and stepdad, and my mum goes, "It just called his name," and we all instantly ran together. My stepdad had this look on his face, and he looked like he was about to puke as well. We got out of there though, and I refused to go back there ever since. More stuff happened, little stuff, like my parents kept hearing their names being called, all kind of stuff. Eventually we left, and I will never be going back there ever again. By the way, if you've ever seen a Native American bent marking tree, they're trees that are tied to rope when they're growing, so that they have a bend near the base, and there was one actually outside of this place. About a year or two later, me and my mum and my stepdad all went on vacation. We went up north, and up there was this supposed haunted mansion, and it was definitely a little bit eerie seeing one of those bent trees there as well. Also, that place was also very haunted. It had Native American print on the windows, and the people who lived there were friends with Native Americans. Also, there was a Native American pottery thing going on there as well. It's called the Riordan Mansion. If you go on tour there, you have to get told all the dark history and all that, but when I went there, I swear that I could feel and sort of sense that something had happened there. I'll perhaps write another post about that some other time, but anyway, this is what happened at my dad's workshop, and I'm super glad that we never have to go back there ever again. I don't know what is completely relevant to this story, so I'm just going to try to be as detailed as possible. So several years ago, when I was still a student, I witnessed something strange. It was 4 a.m. and I had just left my dorm room to wake a friend up in another dorm block. On normal days, we'd wake up at 5 a.m., but we had exams coming up, so that's why I woke up an hour earlier. I had a quick shower and walked over to pick up my friend from her dorm. Now, we didn't have any streetlights on our campus, and we were far from the closest town, like 5 kilometers at least. So the area was pretty dark, with exceptions of the lights emanating from the individual dorm building entrances. Her dorm was around a 3-minute walk, and between her dorm and mine, there wasn't much but a path lined up by a short hedge and some trees here and there, really. Now, around a minute away from her dorm room, now in view, I saw something. A bright, blinding ball of light, roughly the size of a volleyball, shot from behind me. I instantly froze. I felt like this thing was watching me. It made no sound at all, and somehow it didn't illuminate the area around it as much for the amount of light that it was producing. It stayed motionless, around 1.5 meters above and in front of me. I remember standing there and wondering what on earth that was. I was frozen, and I had this terrible sense of dread, and I felt paralyzed. I remember telling myself to look away and to just run, but before I could do anything, it kind of just started hovering around, and then zapped away so fast that I felt like if I had blinked that I would have thought that it just disappeared. Suddenly I wasn't so scared anymore, so I looked around behind the tree to see if I could still spot it, but it was gone. I bolted to my friend's dorm, but by the time that I got there, some people were already awake, and what was supposed to be a 3-minute walk had now been around 25 to 30 minutes. I don't think that I spent that much time staring at that thing, and I've always wondered just what that was. And over the years, I saw some wild theories on the internet. I stumbled upon something called a lightning ball, which had the closest resemblance to what I witnessed, but I'm unsure if it's an actual phenomenon or not. Anyway, I decided to ask all of you guys, has anyone heard of or experienced something similar to this? Is there something that could logically explain what I experienced that morning? Thanks in advance to anyone who can offer any information. As I've been listening to some of the stories here, I remembered this night from about 8 years ago. It was after 11 p.m. and I was taking my dogs out for their last toileting walk before bed. At the time, I was living in a rural area, houses farther apart, lots of wooded area, and lots around with wild pigs often crossing our path. I would often take long walks because one of the dogs had a problem with having accidents in the morning if he hadn't had an adequate walk to do all of his business. It was dark, so I had the flashlight and really wasn't expecting to meet anyone. I mean, especially in the middle of nowhere, so late at night, but there, appeared on the opposite side of the road ahead, was another flashlight. We had few neighbors, but of the homes around, I knew most of all of them from the years. On rare occasion, somebody else may be walking a dog, but I could count the instances on my fingers. As I passed the other flashlight in the night, a tall, thin, pale man, who I had never seen before, crossed the street to my side and began to follow behind me. He yelled out, "Hey, I like your dogs, can I pet them?" I stayed calm, walking briskly, ignoring him. My house was close and I was almost home at the end of the walk. He continued to follow, yelling, "Hey, what's your name? I just want to pet your dogs." He had a thick European or Slavic accent. I ignored him and ran up into my house through the door, locked it, and ran into my bedroom. I told my husband that there was a strange man who followed me home, and that I was super disturbed that he knows where I live now. My brave husband immediately ran out of the house, I guess to find this guy. I was on pins and needles waiting for him to come back. He came back home with his steel baseball bat in hand. He said that he caught up to him and asked who the heck he was, and why he was following around a woman at basically midnight being a creep. The guy said that he was new in town, and he was walking around hoping to meet or make some new friends. Basically, his story was bizarre and totally didn't make any sense. My husband, He told me that if he ever sees him again near our home, he was going to break his knees with the baseball bat. But after that, I never saw him again. Until 2 years later in a neighboring city. I was out with a girlfriend, looking at art in a museum when I turned the corner and suddenly it was him. I would never forget his face. He looked straight at me and I can't remember exactly what he said, but he knew who I was from that night. Something like, "Oh, you're the girl from that night with the dogs." I don't remember because I was just sort of in disbelief, but again, with the thick European accent, tall, skinny, pale, I grabbed my friend's arm and quickly walked in the opposite direction. She asked me, "Do you know that creepy guy?" And I told her the story as we left the museum. Thankfully, after that, I never did see him again. What are the odds, though, of this being a coincidence? Pretty unlikely, right? So I'm pretty sure that we were involved in some weird couples killing spree last night. Me and my boyfriend's family, we're big campers. We try to go as often as possible and try to find different places depending on the weather and the season. We booked a beautiful spot on the lake and had been anticipating this trip for months at this point. Imagine our shock when we got to our site and we discovered that the lake has flooded most of the campsite with the exception of ours, one next to it, and then one about 100 feet away. We didn't get to enjoy the lake because, well, there was no beach access and the water was not safe. We shrugged it off though and we set up our campsite as usual. Now, at about 7 p.m, we see a car pull into the campsite right next to ours. No big deal, we just got about our night. I noticed though that they were not in a hurry to set up camp. A middle-aged man and a woman got out of the car. I'm a very observant and paranoid person, so I noticed details that most people may not think anything of. In my mind though, these campers arrive really late after check-in and don't unload anything from the car. They didn't talk to each other and they kind of just looked into our site in passing. Again, no big deal I think, but a bad storm hit us a few hours later and we were literally holding down our tents while the couple next to us just sat in their car, no tent. I still thought that this was odd, but my boyfriend said they probably were car campers and had the back seat set up to sleep in. Okay, makes sense I guess, but still, why come to a tent campground? Anyway, we go to sleep and all is well, until I'm awakened by the sound of footprints in our vicinity. We had been drinking, so the fact that this noise woke me up means that it was very close to our tent. I spring up instantly and listen. I heard people walking up to our tent and saw the silhouette of a man through my tent too. In a state of panic, I unzip the tent and look outside. Two people with red headbang flashlights are standing about 7 feet from me. I rush myself back into the tent and grab my pepper spray air pistol. During all of this, my boyfriend wakes up asking me why I opened the tent like this, and I explain what I just saw. His reasoning is that it was the neighbors just gathering firewood and I can't shoot them about that. Immediately though, the people walk away and we hear silence once again. I take a moment to think that maybe I'm being paranoid and am also just a little bit hungover. I try going back to bed but can barely sleep at this point. The next morning though, we wake up and the couple next to us has what looked like a tarp tied from one tree to another. I'm thinking, what the heck is that? I notice that the man has the same khaki long pants he had on the night prior, and the woman also wearing the same clothes. This in itself isn't weird while camping, but what was weird is that they were not dressed for camping at all. It's hot, and the clothes that they were wearing were not what you would wear in this environment. Long pants, almost like to protect you when going through the woods to hijack another site is what I thought. We go about our day though, and I keep noticing that the couple doesn't seem to interact with each other like at all. They don't talk, and start a fire in the fire pit for lunch, taking it very easy. Me and my boyfriend's family, though, we decided that due to the weather in the lake, we would head home early. Well, the couple next to us, who had literally just started a fire, immediately packed up and left just as we started to pack. They left in a hurry, too. We eventually finished packing, though, and we get back to my boyfriend's parents' house and decide to stay for a while there. Well, I told my boyfriend's parents about the whole thing and how off and weird it was, and what they had to say honestly chilled me to the core. They said that the man upon arrival seemed to be antagonizing the dogs. They have a Rottweiler mix and a pit mix, to see how they would react. They weren't sure why he took this stance, but after me telling them this, we put our stories together. They pointed out that he would stand and stare at the dogs while the woman was acting busy doing absolutely nothing but just sort of moving around. Then they pointed out that the campers sat facing our campsite and not the lake. They also noticed that there was minimal interaction between them and just seemed to be staring at us the whole time. They said one of the dogs would growl occasionally throughout the night, and they didn't get much rest that night. When I brought up that my boyfriend said that they were probably just getting firewood, they both said, why would they go out of their way to collect firewood that has been heavily rained on? Also, why wait till we go to sleep and then pack up the next day and leave? So, this is what I think. I think these people were locals who knew the condition of the campsite and scoped it out. They noticed that our site was reserved and isolated. No one else was there but us and them and some other campers pretty far apart. I think that they camped out to either rob us or maybe even murder us, but then heard my boyfriend say something about not shooting them, not knowing that it was a pepper spray air gun, and they backed off. Then they spent the afternoon observing us until they saw us leaving and they decided to call it off. Because, honestly, none of their behavior makes much sense. So, my question for all of you guys is, am I crazy? My idiot friends and I thought that it'd be fun to convene with the spirits pretty much daily one summer. We'd regularly break out a homemade Ouija board to see how goofy we could get. Because it gets too hot to do anything outside during this time of year, we had to find things to keep our 14 to 15-year-old selves entertained in, well, let's call her Jennifer's tiny little house in the 90s. Things went from casual and believable, I'm a teenager who died in a house fire, and I'm an old woman who died of natural causes, stuff like that, to downright disturbing. Like, I've never had a body, but I'm able to experience life down here if you say you accept me. For those, we'd always take our hands off and demand a new spirit. After what was essentially auditioning them, the gang and I managed to settle on a rather gentle entity who went by AJ Duke. AJ said that we could talk to him pretty much whenever we wanted. He was 8 years old and didn't want to cross over because he liked watching people go about their lives, and he'd been doing this for hundreds of years. Sounded like it was made up, but whatever. It was a Ouija board after all. All of it was kind of made up, right? Well, it was all well and good for about a week or so. He would tell us things about other people in the neighborhood in his usual terrible spelling, and it was always hot tea. We were so polite back and forth with the thank you and you're so adorable, cringe I know, but we'd occasionally bring AJ up in jokes and casual banter when we weren't playing. He was kind of like a fourth wheel for a few days there, but then it got weird. AJ revealed that our playing was attracting bad spirits onto the property. He said that we shouldn't talk as much anymore, but if we asked for him when we started, he would try and take up the space so they couldn't talk to us. We felt very protected by this little dude, corny as it sounds. AJ was always around and game to talk when we sat back down to gab. Soon, though, we started noticing the thing getting faster and stronger. Our arms would feel pulled this way and that, and go to letters faster and with incredibly skillful precision. Increasingly, we'd end up putting the board away because the vibe started to feel super sour in the room. It's gross to say, but the gentle aspect that we liked about this spirit was replaced with wording that was only better spelled but sexual and catty in nature. And even though we'd put the thing away once it got all weird, we'd always go right back later into the evening or the next day. It became sort of compulsive in a way. Anyway, one night, Jennifer's older sister stopped by to visit their mum, but decided to hang with us for a while. It was literally the first time she'd ever did this, and it felt really cool to have someone who was pretty popular in high school kick it with us. When she came into Jennifer's room and saw the Ouija board, though, she got instantly piqued. We showed her what we usually got up to, and she was skeptical at first. She said, "I'm going to go into the hall and hold some fingers up. Let's see if the Ouija board can get it." So she does it, and one by one, it kept nailing it. You could see the smirk wipe off her face and go into something akin to fear at this point. Then you could see the fear go into a desperate curiosity. She sat down and played with us, getting some gossip about her parents' divorce that we didn't even think to ask about. It didn't take long for the sexual catty stuff to get cranked up again. She was looking at us with a face that also felt the air shift. When we did our usual bellyache and hands-off ritual over it, though, she protested. She thought this was when it really gets interesting. And what did that thing suggest we do not 5 minutes after we decided that she might be right? It suggested that we hold a seance. And you can probably guess what gang went along with it because cool big sis got super excited at the idea. So we did. The board told us to get into a circle and to hold some hands, then call for a spirit to appear. Mind you, the Ouija isn't spelling things out as cleanly. It'd be something like circle, CIRCL, hold hand, invite, and that's the good spelling. Anyway, we do as instructed. Nothing was happening at first, in spite of Big Sister's insistence that if you're there, show us a sign on repeat. Still, our big round eyes would look around at each other. I'm not sure if we were hoping something would happen or if we were waiting for one another to call it off. Nobody wants to be the ultimate nerd, though, and if we played our cards right, we might be able to hang with her crew as they smoked cigarettes between classes and generally looked beautiful and cool. "If you're there, do something," she commanded. A newspaper clipping taped to my friend's mirror flickered and we all jumped a bit. She confirmed that it was the ceiling fan and said that it does that periodically. There's maybe another minute of Big Sister making demands and I was certain someone was going to speak up and break the circle. But then Big Sis dropped, "If you're here, I give you permission to show yourself." And not even a moment after she uttered those words did she leap off her feet and scream while pulling her shirt off. "Get off me," she was screaming, and Jennifer immediately hopped up and pulled the cord to turn the light back on. Her big sister threw herself back first into the wall as though smashing an invisible something that was on her. I remember a single stream of spit hanging from her mouth as it hung open for a moment. It was just really odd to see such a cool person looking decisively, well, not. But I digress. It was absolutely terrifying. She spun around and screamed, "What is it?" over and over, and just below her bra strap, suddenly 3 scratches appeared, in some places deep enough to draw a bit of blood. We instinctively huddled around her, cloaking her in a sort of protective shield, but had no clue what to do, except to move that huddle downstairs and into the living room where her mother was watching TV. She leapt up and took a look at Big Sis's back as we frantically explained. And what we saw was AJ in a sort of welt and blood form. AJ. After this, her mum made us burn that thing. She kept saying, "I told you not to mess with it, I told you." And in rare fashion, Jennifer didn't utter a word of protest at all. She just asked advice on the best way to burn it. A strange bonding experience, standing in the backyard at night and watching her mother, usually quiet, sullen and withdrawn those days, put one arm around Big Sis and use the other to continually douse the doomed board with lighter fluid. In the end, I never did get to stand outside with the cool kids. In fact, if anything, she pretended not to even see us, even harder. So full disclosure, I haven't told many this story and, well, after typing it out, it sounds really out there, I realize that. I've had several paranormal encounters over the course of my life, but this one was the first. When I was a kid, I had a friend named Boo. I called him this because you could see through him. Boo and I played a lot when I was little, even introduced him to the rest of my family. We pretty much did everything together. He was cool because he changed his shape. He could be little like me or big like my dad. He could walk through walls and flew with wings on his back. A week or two before my 4th birthday, Boo wanted to play in the front yard, which was pretty normal for us. After a while, he said that we had been friends a long time and he wanted me to meet his family. He said that he told his parents and siblings about me, and he said everyone was super excited to finally meet me. He told me that they were going to throw me a big party with all the cakes and candies that I could eat. As you could imagine, at this age, I was very excited. So I asked Boo where his family lived. He told me that they lived in the other world, but that it was really easy to get to. I asked how to get there. I was concerned that I couldn't go because, well, I didn't have wings like Boo did. He said that we didn't have to fly to get there, and all I had to do was follow him away from my house. He wanted me to go down the street and into a small grove of trees. I got kind of scared about getting into trouble, and so I told Boo that Mummy and Daddy say that I'm not allowed to leave the yard. He said that they're not with us right now, so they won't know that we even left. Dad was inside watching TV at the time, and I think Mum was at the store. I still wasn't sure though. He told me though that we were best friends and I should trust him. Boo then took me by the arm and started leading me out of the yard. He had opened the gate for me because I didn't know how to. I walked with him to the street corner. I stopped when I was suddenly filled with an overwhelming sense of fear. Boo asked why I stopped. I told him that I was scared, because that's the furthest I'd ever been away from the house without Mummy and Daddy. He said not to worry though, because we're almost there. His grip then tightened around my arm, and he started pulling me hard. I told him that he was hurting me and to stop. Boo then told me, in a very flat voice, to be quiet. He said that if I didn't behave that I wouldn't get my party, and that they would have to throw all the food away. I started to cry at that and asked why he was being so mean to me. Boo said that it didn't matter because we would be in the other world soon anyway. Crying, I told him that I didn't want to go anymore. He responded by saying if I didn't go with him, then he would just leave me there, and I would have to find my own way home. I said fine, and yanked my arm away from him. He then made his face look really weird, like not human weird. There were shapes that shouldn't be there, and parts of it were really sharp. And then all of a sudden, he just disappeared. I did make it back home and sat on the porch and cried. Boo was my best friend at the time. I didn't understand why he was so mean to me. A few minutes later, though, my mum returned from the grocery store and asked me what was wrong. I told her everything about mine and Boo's fight. She looked back, though, and saw the gate was still open, and reminded me that I wasn't allowed to go outside without her or my dad. My father also got into trouble for not keeping an eye on me. But that wasn't the last time that I saw Boo. He was never the same after that, though. He kept being kind of mean to me, and one day I told him that we weren't friends anymore because friends aren't mean to each other. So I told Boo to leave and to never come back. And after that, I never did see him again. Years later, my mom told me how scared she was after I told her about what happened, because she said that gate was open that day when she got home from the store, and she knew that I was much too little to open it by myself. So, a kind of scary thing just happened to me a couple of hours ago, and I'm still kind of shaken up by it. A woman was knocking at my door, and when I answered, she said that she heard a child screaming and an older male yelling. She told me that it was super loud, and she heard an older man saying something along the lines of, "People are looking for you now." I live in a duplex with my boyfriend and dog. We live on the main floor, and we have a neighbor who lives by himself in the upstairs unit. We have absolutely no children. But I also found it odd because moments before this I was in my shared laundry room that you access from the backyard with the back door open. I always do that to let my dog out into the backyard, and I can assure you that I heard absolutely nothing. The way that she was talking and the look on her face, though, seemed really genuine, so I was trying to reassure her that we had no children, and she probably just heard one of the neighbor's kids or something. We live close to the city in a populated area, so there's lots of kids and they scream when they're playing all the time. We just kept going in circles, though. I didn't have any children in the home, and she most likely had the wrong house. I even offered her to peek over the fence and check the yard if she wished, but otherwise, that was really all I could do. But when I'd say these things, she'd just stare with this accusatory look in silence, then start up again on what she had heard. That's when she began to subtly force herself through the doorway, like a foot or a hand. By this point, our upstairs neighbor and my boyfriend heard what was going on and joined me at the door. She just refused to accept my explanation, though, and eventually fully got herself into the doorway. She clearly wasn't going to leave, so that's when I called the police. She stood in that doorway until they arrived. After the cops talked with her and asked us questions, we found out that she admitted to using meth earlier that morning. So they told us that she was just experiencing hallucinations due to coming down from that. But they had to keep telling her that you're free to go now, and she very hesitantly left. She kept turning around and looking at the house, so the cops even hollered out, "Let's just do a quick check," to make her believe they searched the house. And I know that this could have been so much worse and isn't the craziest thing, but still, I'm really nervous that she's going to come back, and I can't stop checking my windows. Plus, someone that high on meth, well, they can't be the safest, right? This took place a few months ago. So, there are these 3 abandoned houses as well as 3 barns close to my house, and are going to be getting torn down here in the next couple of months. So me and my siblings thought, why not go and check them out before that happens? I'd already checked them all out with a buddy, but I wanted to do it again, but with my siblings this time because, why not? But we had only explored one of the houses previously because there was a small window that we could crawl through into the basement, and another hole through the wall that we crawled through to enter the house, since all the doors were boarded up pretty much. But there are 2 more houses we haven't explored yet, one being really small and the other being absolutely huge. After some research on the internet, though, it made sense as it seemed as if the house was leased to multiple people, mostly around the age of college or to younger families who maybe couldn't afford to rent entire apartments. The time before, when I was with my friend, we brought a screwdriver with all sorts of those attachment things that go on the end so that we could unscrew all the different bolts and then used a hammer for the nails too. When we got there, the board was already torn off luckily, even though it wasn't the week prior when we first tried to go in, when we didn't have the screwdrivers. Also, I'll call this house the Red House since it has red brick. To describe this red house, it's like you connected two average double-story houses together. It is that big, and I mean, we ended up taking an hour to explore it, but that's because we were looking around too. This time when me and my buddy explored it though, it was pretty cool. Not too much graffiti and lots of stuff everywhere on the ground. We found some old cheap purses, Pokemon and baseball cards, a bunch of broken keyboards, books and old school supplies, plus a lot of other completely random things. There was even an old tanning bed that I think we discovered was from the late 80s. There were the occasional drug beetles and pills, usually in corners of old bedrooms or in the bathrooms. And the next time, I just wanted to experience this again with my siblings. This time, it was night when my mother was asleep, so we could actually get away with it. I dropped them off in my car and I drove half a mile to a trailhead where I could park my car and it would be hidden. I then rode an electric scooter the half mile to where they were so we could go in. Now, there was this gate that we had to go over since there was barbed wire, and so I folded up the electric scooter and hid it in the tall grass. This road behind the gate, it led to the first house that we had already been in, so we were just trying to go to the big one. From here, you have to walk pretty far through this tall grass to get to the red house. As we approached it, we finally turned our flashlights on and then entered this house. Last time, me and my friend were calling out to make sure nobody was inside, but this time it was nighttime and I didn't want to risk somebody calling the cops since they heard yelling near the abandoned houses at like 2 a.m. Regardless though, it was a stupid decision. In any case, we made our way in and we looked around. I think it's also important to note here that this isn't the front door, it's actually the back door. One of two back doors, in fact. The house is on a hill, so from the road, it sort of looks like one story, but on the other side you can see that it's definitely 2 stories. This back door is in the very corner of the house, so you sort of explore from one end to the other. As we walked through, I could have sworn that I heard some light footsteps. But this is an older house. I looked it up in fact, and it was built in 1964, has 7 acres of land and is 3,800 square feet, so pretty big, yeah? But anyway, it didn't sound any different from when me and my friend first explored it, and it was night, so quiet sounds were extra loud. As we made it through the other end of the bottom of the house where the staircase was, and made our way up, I heard more footsteps. And this time, I told my siblings that we should probably head out. They didn't hear anything, but they were also under the assumption that we were the only ones there, and they weren't being very cautious or aware, I guess you could say. When you go up the stairs, though, on one side it leads to the garage, which is very small for such a large house, again, probably because it's older. And on the other side you go past a short hallway, and it leads to the kitchen and a family room with a sort of lounge area, I think you would call it. This whole area is super open and it feels like a lot of empty space, but it only covers around half the upstairs. On the other side is a straight hallway with around 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. And that was when I thought that I saw somebody moving from one bedroom across the hallway to the other, from left to right. But my light didn't go very far since I was using my phone light. I start angrily whispering to my siblings who are already kind of close to the hallway, which leads to where I saw the person, as to not yell but to get attention urgently. They ignore me though, which really ticked me off, and I quickly walk across this open area to try and maybe yank their arm, until this time we all hear something drop. In my opinion, the guy dropped it on purpose to let us know that he was there, but after this next part, really, I'm not completely sure. Immediately, my siblings and I jump. It sounded like a bookshelf was knocked over or something, and since it was really loud and heavy, as we could feel the ground vibrate as we were upstairs, It was now confirmed that somebody was definitely there with us. We turned around and started running to the staircase, which is pretty much in a straight line. The bottom floor sort of zigzags around until it leads to a hallway that goes straight to the other side of the house. As we make our way around the zigzag rooms and make our way to the corner with the hallway, we start hearing running upstairs towards that staircase. Obviously, we're already running, so we don't slow down. We turn the final corner and make our way outside, where I run in a straight direction and then to the left in an attempt to hide in the tall grass, which also has a direct line to the other side of a huge grass area to where the gate is. I lay down, and when my siblings run out behind me, I tell them to get down as well. We were maybe 30 or so feet deep into the grass when I see a dark figure run out of the house a few feet, stop, look around, and run into the small house next to this one, which is only like 50 or so feet away. I thought that house was all boarded up still, but it looked like he ran to the side of the house where I guess his entryway was. There was a large shed thing in the way, so I couldn't see exactly where he went, but I knew that there was barbed fence over there, so he would have to run behind to where we were to follow us, as there is maybe a 20-foot wide gap where there is no barbed fence, so I guess that way vehicles could enter. In any case, I heard his footsteps running around, but I couldn't see where he was. We started to sort of army crawl across the grass, but really slowly as to not make much rustling noise. We start crawling faster, but then I heard his footsteps stop, so either he ran away or was stopped, maybe looking at us. I kept crawling on all fours since the grass was now tall enough to still cover me, and I was looking behind to see if I could see his outline in the dark, which thankfully I couldn't see him. We started to hear a cracking sound though, and it sounded like he was cracking the plywood boards, but I don't know why he would do that. I don't know what it was, to be honest. It then sounded like he was frustrated though, as we could hear loud grunts. We just kept crawling though. We were maybe crawling for a good 5 minutes to get to the other side, even if we were far enough for him to not see us. It honestly felt like a lot more, and every minute felt like 10. We eventually get to the road though, which led to the gate, and at this point, we stop outside the gate and wait for the few cars to pass before we crawl through. I have my siblings crawl under first, and I swear I heard running through the tall grass behind me, but as I made it under and through and started running, it didn't actually look like he was following us. Maybe he was too far behind for me to see, but I'm not sure. Also, yes, I did get my scooter, which my brother had already unfolded and was riding away with me, and my sister running behind. We didn't stop until we got to the trailhead off to the side of the main road, where we literally threw the scooter into the back, jumped inside, locked the doors, and peeled out of there. In the end, we drove off peacefully, knowing that this person was definitely homeless and could not get into a car to drive off after us. He was also probably not on anything, as he was moving too quick, which I don't know if it would be better or worse for us if he was and we ended up having to fight back, but luckily we didn't have to. In the end, we made it home safe and sound, and we didn't speak about it at all with our parents. My siblings, they kind of laughed about it more after the first week, but it still scared me knowing just how serious that was. I don't think they actually realized just how dangerous that whole situation actually was. We survived though, and I guess that's all that really matters. Also, definitely, I do not plan on ever going back. This happened almost 3 years ago. During COVID, I was sort of lost and extremely bored without human interaction. That was until me and my buddies found mountain biking when our parents allowed us to see each other outside. Living in Washington State, there's a lot of woods perfect for mountain biking trails. Us being under the age of 16 at the time, we had no license to drive in actual mountain bike parks, so instead, we built them. Apart from the one trail already near our house with a 30-foot gap jump, which was way above our skill level at the time, we wanted to make something new. Basically, there is an entrance to this trail near my friend's house, and you walk down it a ways until you find the normal trail. To get to our trail, you find this one spot on the trail that turns 90 degrees to the left, but instead, you go to the right of the trail through all this mud, weave between these fallen trees and tree branches, and from there, you go right where it sort of curls around until it goes straight again. From there, you go straight through this small pathway, which is still hidden from all the ferns, until you reach this abandoned forest road. Now, you follow this forest road down, which goes for about 80 yards or so. It's also covered in huge amounts of mud, and if you were there, you would see all the clumps with our footprints going about 6 or maybe even more inches deep, especially in some spots where it's extremely deep. But there are more fallen trees on this forest road, but if you continue to make your way down until it sort of stops, and then go off to the right and walk around this hidden pathway that weaves and curls all around this huge area of ferns for maybe another 60 or so yards, you finally reach the bottom of the trail that we made. It probably takes about 10 minutes to get there, but around 5 on a good day where it isn't wet, like during the summer. Essentially, you have no reason to be there unless you're either lost, which is almost impossible to do unless you purposely wander off the trail, or are looking for it. And on this particular day, my buddies couldn't go out to help build, so I decided to bring my younger siblings along. The only reason I felt scared going alone was around a week earlier, me and one of my friends thought that we found a cougar den with some scat nearby in a few spots. I also just didn't want to be alone that far out. My sister decided to come with, but my brother, I guess, had a friend who he was going to hang out with or something. Anyways, me and my sister ride our bikes there, carry them through the hidden area, and throw them off into some fern bushes right before you get to the forest road. From there, we went down that long trail. The main reason why I was out there was to be sure that no trees had fallen, because we had some extra winds the days prior, and so we knew that if we needed to bring some bigger saws to cut. And so if we could figure this out, then we would know if we would need to bring some bigger saws to cut them. There wasn't any damage, but around a week later, a tree did end up blocking the end of the trail, ironically. Also, it's probably important that I mention that it was a pretty rainy day that day. So, we were there for around 10 minutes while I showed my sister the trail, when all of a sudden I get this call from my mum telling me that my brother was asking where we were since he was going to come and find me. I guess he had a change of plans or something, but me being lazy, I told my sister to go walk back down and wait outside the trail entrance on the neighborhood to wait for him. This would also give me the opportunity to do some work while she was doing this. I called her every few minutes or so since my brother should have arrived, but he hadn't at that point. About 10 minutes go by, so she's been waiting for about a good 20 minutes when my mum called me again telling me that he had returned and couldn't find us. At this point, I was kind of annoyed, but I called my sister telling her to come back down and to make sure nobody was around or following her for when she entered the trail, as to not give our spot away. I was waiting from anywhere between 7 to 10 minutes when I was wondering what was taking her so long. So when I walked over to the end of the forest road and I saw her walking all the way on the other side, I was kind of relieved. She wasn't walking on the forest road yet, but she was perpendicular to it, walking towards it. From this angle, the bushes go from anywhere between hip to shoulder height, and so I could see her upper body with her hood on. This is when I realized that I didn't remember her wearing a white sweatshirt or windbreaker. And once the person turned the corner, I could tell that it was not her at all, and was actually likely a grown man. I quickly backpedaled off to the side and down the hill a little bit behind a tree so I could call my sister. I was wondering where she was and if she had gotten lost because, after all, it's pretty hard to get to. I also didn't want this person to steal our bikes, and did I forget to mention my bike was over $2,000?
Don't worry, I made it worth it for how much I ended up riding it, but it also was going to last a lifetime if properly maintained. Anyway, with my worries about my bike in mind, I called my sister, and the second that I heard the first ring, I heard a voice on the other side of the tree that I was hiding behind say, "What are you doing?" It was my sister. I quickly told her to get down as to not be seen by the person. I didn't want them to find the trail that we were building, as I didn't want to get into any sort of trouble, and I also wanted to keep it hidden. I also wanted to get back to the bikes, and she could tell by the panic in my voice that I was serious, and when I told her that there was a person and she looked, she said, "No, there isn't." I peeked over, and sure enough, nobody was there now. But I knew what I saw though, and so we made our way back, walking past where I saw the person. I was really worried the bikes would be gone by this point, so we trekked through the mud and my heart was absolutely pumping. And during this time, I just couldn't help the feeling of being watched. I could feel the adrenaline rush, and I almost knew that they were off in the trees, watching us. I was so distracted thinking that they were going after the bikes when I saw them disappear that I didn't even think that they would be hiding. Thankfully, as we made our way down the trail while acting as calmly as possible, we arrived to see the bikes, which were still indeed there. At one point, it did look like there was a different shoe print though, because it was slightly larger and differently shaped, but it was hard to tell in this area. Now, we made our way all the way back, and while I constantly looked behind me, making sure that we weren't being followed, I could have sworn that I heard things and saw things out there in the forest. Towards the end, where the trail splits off and leads to the neighborhood, there's a short but wide wooden bridge which is covered in dirt. Thankfully, since it was raining and you could easily see footprints, I could see the extra pair. You could vividly see my first set of footprints to get to the trail, as well as my sister's, with an additional set of her footprints going back and then returning, and then a shoe print on top of hers showing that it was most recent. This confirmed my sighting. My heart dropped once again, and we quickly got out of there, still making sure that nobody else was behind us. When I got home, I didn't hesitate to tell my parents, who only told me that the next time that I need to be with her at all times. I could tell that they partly didn't believe me or thought that I was just over-exaggerating or something. All these questions, though, went through my head. On one side, we live in a pretty nice neighborhood, and even if it was a random person who didn't live there, why were they there? If they were maybe worried about why a random little girl was wandering off in the trails, why did they even bother following? And when they did, why so far behind and so creepily? Why not call out? If it was a worker, why were they wearing what they were wearing? Wouldn't there have been boot prints? Wouldn't they be wearing a vest or a helmet? A truck parked outside the trail. Wouldn't they have something else with them? And why hide like that? If they thought that she was alone originally and they walked past two bikes, why didn't they keep going? It wasn't until they must have seen her talking to me or just saw me when they hid. Why did I feel like I was being watched when I was under the assumption the person was off stealing my bike and not even near us anymore? Why the footprints entering but no going back? Why is someone hiking in an area like this in that attire? How did they even find the area by themselves? They definitely found it because of my sister, and when they did, they followed? When they saw how hard it was to navigate, why keep going? Why feel the need to hide from two younger kids as well? And most importantly, what would have happened if I wasn't there at that point? Anyways, I feel the need to explain some more details too, because the footprints were maybe half an inch to an inch bigger than my shoes. My shoes were smaller at the time since they were beaters, but regardless, my guess is that this person was anywhere from 2 inches shorter than me to 2 inches taller. I never got a good look at their face, but they were definitely white or had lighter skin. I'm going to be honest and tell you that The person wasn't huge or massive, trying to make it sound more scary than what it is, but they definitely did fill out their sweatshirt or coat, so they were pretty stocky, but definitely much bigger than me at the time as well. At this point in time, I believe I was around 5'8" and maybe 130 pounds, so pretty small. It's also important to note that, I don't know, maybe the person was innocent, but the whole situation seemed very fishy. And like I said, I always wonder exactly what would have happened to my sister if I wasn't there that day. I grew up in the early 90s in a small town. During the warm summer days, my father would often make me turn off the TV and go outside to play. We lived in a house on a cul-de-sac, but a few lots didn't have houses built on them yet, so there weren't many neighbors or any kids my age to play with. So I was often left to find ways to entertain myself while playing outside. I vividly remember on 2 different occasions being visited by a strange man who resembled looking kind of like a hippie. He was about 6 feet tall, slender with long brown hair and a beard. I had to have been between the ages of 5 or 7 during this time. On the first occasion, I was playing outside in my inflatable kiddie pool. I decided that it was time to put the inflatable pool away so I could switch to a different activity. My dad didn't allow us to switch activities until we put away our toys, so leaving the inflatable pool in the front yard just wasn't an option. So there I was at about 6 years old, on my front porch struggling to deflate this extra large 7-foot blow-up kiddie pool when this strange guy started walking towards me. I was close enough to the front door of the house where if I had to scream for help, someone would have heard me, so I didn't feel too afraid by his approach. He greeted me though, and explained to me that if I squeezed the rubber nozzle part of the inflatable pool, then the air would escape more easily. He gently took the kiddie pool from me, deflated it, folded it up neatly, handed it back to me with 2 hands, and then slowly just walked away. Obviously, that was a bit weird, but about a year had gone by and I was out playing again, this time riding my bike. At some point, my chain had popped off my bike, so I walked my bike around to the backyard in the shade so I could try and put the bike chain back on into the gears. About 10 minutes later, I saw that same hippie guy walking down the driveway into my backyard. My first thought was, how did he know that I was even back here? My second thought was, why is he so comfortable walking into our backyard with my dad in front of the yard mowing grass? Most neighbors were intimidated by my father's large size, or our big Great Dane, so his confidence and trespassing intrigued me. He greeted me again the same like before, then knelt down eye level to me on the opposite side of my bike, and proceeded to reset the chain on my bike. I thanked him for his help, and he strolled off again. Later on that day during dinner, I questioned my father about the man who had walked into our yard and helped me to fix my bike. I figured my father had known the stranger since he allowed him to walk into the backyard to help me fix my bike like that. But my father told me that that was impossible because he had been in the front yard all day doing yard work and washing cars, and he would have seen anyone approaching the house since we lived on a cul-de-sac. I also confessed that it wasn't my first time meeting this man, and he had helped me out last summer with my kiddie pool. My father had a look of discomfort on his face and asked me what the guy looked like. It was a small town and everybody knew everyone, but he could not figure out who this guy could have been. My dad instructed me not to talk to strangers and to alert him if I saw the guy approaching our home ever again. But after that, I never saw the strange guy again. Fast forward to recently, a few weeks ago, I was talking to a close friend and randomly remembered those 2 visits from my childhood and shared the story with my close friend. After a few laughs, my friend asked me what exactly did the strange guy look like, to see if he had seen anyone that resembled him on any crime documentaries. I explained to him that the guy honestly looked like a white Jesus dressed in a linen button-up shirt and leather sandals. We laughed a bit more about the whole thing, and really, that was it. This takes place some years ago in France. We wanted to camp with my family during summer holidays, and so we took our motorhome. There was my father, my mother, my little brother, 4 years old, and me, 10 years old at the time. After traveling for a day, my father looked at the map to find a campsite. Unfortunately, it was full though. It was already getting dark, so we decided to drive again for a bit and found a parking lot with a few motorhomes already there and some trucks. After getting installed and eventually having a bite to eat, we went to bed. For context too, there were 2 beds in the RV, one in the back where my parents sleep, and one in the front called the overcab bed where I slept with my brother. At night, my father had the habit to pee outside, in the grass, the forest, etc., and after we went to bed, we chatted a little bit and eventually slept. Now, in the middle of the night, I woke up to hearing some noises like rustling or someone searching for something, so I thought that it was my mother or father. After a few seconds, I decided to see, but it was dark and all I could see is a black silhouette like 2 meters or 6'5" in the living room that opened the door to go out. I immediately thought that it was my father that wanted to pee and go out, so I just went back to sleep. In the morning we all woke up, and after having some breakfast, my mother couldn't find her handbag and the bag that we had our camera and photo camera in. And that was the moment that I realized that the silhouette that I saw was not my father, but someone who had broken in and robbed us that night. After explaining to my parents what I saw, we went to the police and they told us that it was a common thing here. We never found out who it was, and we lost the bags, but I still get shivers when I think about it 20 years later. I mean, what if I had said something to the man? Would he have fled? Would he have attacked us? Honestly, I think that we were lucky to have just been robbed that night. For my safety, I won't reveal which park system I work for, but it is important to know for this story that I, 19 and female, work a position at a Michigan nature park, not entirely dissimilar to that of a park ranger. My job duties usually include manning the entry booth, locking up the buildings at night, etc. And although not a usual duty, sometimes they ask me to walk or take a park vehicle through some of the trails, as I'm on the younger side but still have several years of experience at the park. I'm a relatively experienced outdoorsman. Now, I've had some odd things happen to me while on the job that I just cannot quite explain. I'm decently well versed in some areas of the paranormal, and although not entirely relevant, it's of note that I am also a Norse pagan, as a part of a family belief, and often wear protective symbols as well. To be honest, I've started wearing them more since these odd things have been happening too. I've tried looking into it myself, but overall I'm overwhelmed and not sure where to look, so a friend suggested that I share this here and, well, maybe get some help. So there are 2 things in particular that I want to ask about. I usually work the night shift, and this night in particular it was raining a lot and the conditions were getting unsafe. I was posted out in the booth, which is multiple miles from the office, so when things took a turn for the worse, my boss radioed me back. Some people who don't spend a lot of time in the woods, they don't realize how dark and deep the woods can actually get, much less in the dark at night. But I had a flashlight and the light from the booth, which gave me probably 30 feet of visibility. And when I went to grab my stuff so that I could lock up the booth and get to my car, I swore that I saw something that moved very human-like, but moved in a really odd way too. Like, the only way that I can describe it is as if a horse-deer hybrid tried to run like a person. But there were no people out there. and it was most definitely not a deer. I'm probably not describing it in the best way, but whatever it was very off. So I got to my car ASAP, and it didn't start right away, which was a bit odd, but not entirely out of character for my car. But when I turned the key a second time, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, and it looked like whatever it was had gotten closer. The drive goes without incident, but I'm still off about what I saw, and when I get closer, I radio in to see if they need me to pick anyone up. And the radio doesn't work right, which was definitely very out of character. I mean, these radios are designed to work in awful conditions, and I was the closest I'd been to any sort of signal in a while. I chalked it up to the weather and pulled into the office. But as I do, something runs past me. I didn't get a good look at what it was, but I can assure you that it was not a person. And I'm telling you that there's not an animal in the woods that I know of that looks like either of the things that I saw. And honestly, I just can't seem to shake this. The second thing that I would like to ask about is, this happened more recently and is what prompted me to finally reach out to somewhere like this. I was walking the trails for security purposes close to closing. We close at around 11 p.m. and start a final walkthrough around 9 p.m. We do this to make sure that no one's stuck on the trail or hurt, so they aren't stuck overnight when there's fewer staff and none that patrol those trails. So I was walking one of our trails and I was pretty deep in the woods already, as I'm a fairly fast hiker, and this is a trail that I know well as well. I was already about 2 miles into the trail when things started to get a bit weird. I hear a noise off in the distance, and at first I thought it could be a coyote or maybe an owl, so I pressed on. Coyotes stay off the trails, won't go after people unless they have dogs, and dogs are banned in the woods here anyway. And they know when we do our sweeps, so I wasn't too concerned. But then the noises got weirder. I'm used to the sounds of the woods, and I know the area and the wildlife very well, and I have never once in my life heard that sound before. It didn't come from any animal that I recognize, and it most definitely was not human. I've never aborted a sweep before, even when I've had coyotes nearby, but it just didn't feel right this day, and so I got out of there. We're allowed to use our judgment in these cases, thankfully, so I didn't get in any trouble, but if anyone has any idea as to what either of these things could be, please let me know, and I would really, really appreciate your help. This was around the winter of 2006. I was 8 years old at the time, and I was living in Thunder Bay, Ontario with my family, and we lived by the auditorium and the Canada Games complex. There was a big hill at the east end of the parking lot that myself and the neighborhood kids would go sledding at. Usually our parents would come, but since we were right across the streets, if it was daylight, they'd sometimes let us go out on our own since it was only about 400 meters from the front door. Now, one day, a few of us went to the sliding hill. There was 4 of us, myself and 3 kids from a big family from down the street. There was the older sister and 2 of the younger brothers. Everything went as usual until we noticed an old blue Ford F-150. I still remember the rust on the wheel well and the hood. The driver, he just sat there watching us. He was older, mid-40s to 50, dark grey shoulder-length hair and a salt and pepper beard. He was sat there smoking and watching us. We all immediately felt pretty creeped out and didn't take our eyes off of him. I would often watch a lot of crime shows with my mum at that time, and I could feel the hairs standing on my neck as I knew something was just off. The older sister of the family said that we'll slide down the hill and just walk home, as he just kept watching us. But he got out of his truck at one point and started walking toward us, and we immediately took off running across the parking lot and He just stood there on the top of the hill smoking and watching us run in a panic. They told their parents and were told not to go back, but I for some reason was afraid to tell mine. A few months later, we were driving up the street that we lived on, Beverly Street, and as I was looking out of the window, I got that heavy, dreadful feeling in my body. That was when I saw his truck in the parking lot of the apartments right next to the clinic that my mum would take me to, and the convenience store that I would bike to with some of the older kids in my neighborhood. I never biked up there again, and when I would see the truck driving on the main drag, I'd hide in the bushes or behind the hedges every time. Only once did I see him drive through the neighborhood, and it was right before I moved. I was playing in the yard of the kids that I was sliding with that following summer, and we all just stood there and watched as he slowed down and glanced out the window, cigarette in his mouth. Only a few of us had seen him, and the dread that we felt as he looked over at each of us was indescribable. I moved a few weeks later after that, but I never forgot about that day. I recently in my adult life moved from Manitoba to southern Ontario, and I decided to drive by my old house on the way, but when I drove by those apartments though, I never saw the truck. I don't know why I was looking for it, but I still felt something odd in me. This was a long time ago, so I don't remember my exact age at the time, but I was very young, probably around kindergarten age. My family was living in an old farmhouse that my grandparents lived next door to. The house was built in the 1830s, and this was the 1990s, so the whole property is over 160 years old, and everything definitely looked a bit old and a little bit worn. My experience was during a cold winter night, either late November or early December. The sun is fully set and it's pretty dark. Being out in the countryside, there's not much light at night and it's dead quiet. My mum sent me to my grandparents to return some movies that I had borrowed. It was a pretty short walk, but I had to cross the farm driveway to get there, and that is where my oldest and most vivid memory takes place. I'm a child walking alone at night, even though now I know both my mum and grandma were watching me, so I was pretty scared. Once I got to the farm driveway, I remember feeling just not right. I wasn't exactly scared, but my anxiety was very high. I remember turning to look down at the barns and seeing my dad out in the workshop, and then I turned back to start walking, and that's when I saw the boy and his horse. I remember them so vividly. They had a pale off-white glow, but it didn't emanate from them. You couldn't see light on any of the surroundings, but the boy was wearing dark underwear with suspenders, a white long-sleeve shirt, and a hat with a white brim. He was holding the reins of the horse. I don't remember the horse as well as the boy, but I remember that it was fully saddled and looked healthy. I cannot remember the color, though. It was either white, brown, or a mix of that, like most horses, unfortunately. It for sure wasn't black, though, but he never moved from the spot that they stood. The boy just stared at me while he held the reins. In fact, he didn't blink a single time. He just stared at me, face completely emotionless. I don't remember the moving either, but it was only seconds, but remember being completely frozen when I saw him, too scared to scream. Then I think my fight or flight kicked in because I bolted home and almost broke the door, throwing myself inside. The weirdest thing, though, was when I looked back, they were gone, like they had just disappeared into thin air. I told my parents, but they didn't believe me, and fast forward 10-ish years, something interesting happens. Same property, and my mum is running a daycare out of it at this time, and the boy and his horse is just something fun that I tell my friends when they first come over at this point. This time it was daylight, and in the morning. A kid was getting dropped off by their parent, and all of a sudden they point to that spot, and they say, "Look, Mummy, a horsey." I didn't see anything when I looked, but my mum said that I went super pale and I was pretty freaked out. But I also was kind of excited that somebody else had potentially seen the same thing I did. I'm glad it was less traumatic for that kid though. I had some experiences in that house as well, but I'm almost 100% certain that they were the result of sleep paralysis. The only one that I'm not certain on is one where I watched indentations move around the carpet in my childhood room like someone was walking. But I was also in bed, so still, it could have been sleep paralysis, I admit. I have gone to visit the property since then. My grandma still lives next door, but I haven't seen or heard anything about the boy and his horse since the daycare kids saw them. It still blows my mind just how vividly I can picture that night. I recently went on vacation with my parents to a resort. And one night, my dad went to bed early while my mum and I sat outside and talked. She is a very reserved woman who keeps many things to herself and likes small talk, so this caught me completely off guard. She was looking up at the sky and seemed like she was thinking hard about something. She suddenly asks me, in Spanish, "Do you remember Cousin George? You met him when you were little, but he died not long after." I did remember him a little anyway. I remember going to Cuba with my parents to visit family, and I met my cousin there. I was about 8, I think, and he was very sweet and welcoming, about my dad's age. He asked me so many questions about life in the US and played games with me. After a while, he went over to the adults, and suddenly he became sort of hysterical, crying and hyperventilating, yelling things that I couldn't understand at the time. It scared me, so I remember hiding, but that was really all that I remember of him. My mum proceeded to tell me what she remembers of him. This took place in Havana, where they're from. My mum said he was a completely normal person. We used to spend a lot of time together because he lived next door. He was about 10 years older than me, but he took me everywhere, running errands, hanging out with his friends. He helped people with housework and with livestock. There was never anything odd about him. Everyone loved him. Then, when I was about 7 or 8, he was 17 or 18, he had to do his mandatory military service, as every male did in Cuba. At first, he wrote me letters, but after a few months, those stopped. He would only write to his mother, and I overheard her talking to my mum and grandma Hilda about how something about his letters just didn't seem right. And then the letters stopped altogether. One day, I was at my aunt's, George's mum's, and there was a knock at our door. I answered it, and there were 2 men in military uniforms. My aunt and my grandma hurried towards the door and told me to go away. I hid behind the hallway wall and listened. I couldn't hear everything, but the men said that Cousin George was unwell and he was being sent back home. A couple of weeks later, sure enough, Cousin George gets sent back, escorted by another young soldier who was his friend. Grandma later told me that his friend had quietly let them know that Cousin George had apparently been in a submarine with the Russians, no idea where, and that while he was down there, he saw something and immediately went haywire. After that, he was very different. Like, he'd be acting completely normally, and then randomly go into hysterics, screaming nonsense, crying, throwing things. He also refused to talk about his military service. One day, when I was 16, someone in the neighborhood gave me my first Bible. I was really excited to receive it too. We didn't have much of anything, so being given a Bible as a gift was really exciting. I came home with it, and Cousin George was there. He saw it and stared at it in my hands for a moment. He then stood up and walked over to me, grabbed the Bible from my hands, and flipped to the first chapter. He then said, "Genesis, the first great lie." The way that he said it terrified me, though, and I grabbed the Bible back in case he'd try to destroy it. He didn't follow me when I left, but I could hear him having another meltdown after this. Cousin George, he never recovered. He ended up becoming extremely religious later in life, but still had frequent episodes and delusions. He passed in the early 2010s from a heart attack, unfortunately. My mum adored him, and I know that hurt her badly to see him suddenly change like that. I could see the pain in her eyes as she told me all of this, staring off into the night sky as she spoke. I have a couple of theories, though, about what may have happened. One, he may have been subjected to psychological experiments at the hands of the Cubans or Russian military that led him to lose his mind. Two, he may have developed a mental illness later in life. I remember reading that schizophrenia often comes around in males in their early 20s. The stress of military service, maybe that could have triggered an underlying mental illness. Or three, he really did see something that made him snap. But what could it have been? If anyone else has any theories, then genuinely, I would love to hear them. I'm a registered nurse, and in my career of floor nursing, I have many stories, as I'm sure that many nurses do. But one that always comes to mind is this. It was an older woman that, at the end of the shift, interrupted me while I was checking in on her. As she raised her shaky hand pointing in my direction, she said, "Could you please tell him to leave?" I turned around, just the empty corner of the room behind me, and said, "Who?" Dead serious, she repeated, "Him. Tell him to leave. I don't like him." I thought that this was strange, as she wasn't a psych patient, no history of hallucinations or anything. So I replied, "Ma'am, there's no one there. It's just you and I in the room." She kept staring in the corner. "No, there's a man in the corner wearing a dark hood. Tell him to leave." Well, I finished my shift pretty much then and there, and I went home. I came back the next week, and that patient was no longer in that room. After inquiring from co-workers, I found out that she had passed away 2 days after the night that she told me about the man in the hood in her room. And for whatever reason, I still get chills when I think about it. To start this off, I'm 21 and a single mum to a beautiful 9-month-old. I live in a granny flat at the back of my parents' property. The previous tenants were the previous owner's daughter and 2 granddaughters. Apparently the daughter, a single mum, often had a fleeting relationship that would move in and out of the flat as well. And when I moved in last year, September, I was still pregnant. The very first night, something watched me while I slept too, I'm sure of it. I could see it, but I couldn't really feel its presence, I guess. My cat wouldn't stop staring in the direction of the door as well. And now, I didn't know this, but there's a motion sensor light in one of the top corners of my room, apparently, facing the door. The reason I didn't know this is because it would turn on and stay on, even when neither I nor my cat were moving. This happened again the next afternoon, and I asked my mum to bless my house, as that was normally something that we do when we would move into a new house or weird stuff happens anyway. After my mum blessed my place, things were fine again until October, when I started seeing shadow people in my parents' house. I could see and feel them watching me, and I felt that they were angry that I ignored them. Like, I don't know how I got to that conclusion, but it's just the way that I felt. After my daughter was born, my mother blessed the flat again, and everything felt fine again. But whenever anyone comes into my flat, they always say that they feel like they're not alone, that something is watching them and that it is angry. And this all brings me to the past 3 months when my baby started with what we thought was sleep regression. She would wake up screaming bloody murder like she was hurt, and wouldn't fall back asleep unless I held her and went to go sleep on the couch in the TV room with her. I am at this point exhausted, frustrated, and
I often find myself getting extremely angry, to the point where I walk away and have to just scream somewhere, which I can't help but feel ashamed about. I recently started dating again as well, and my boyfriend comes to sleep over on the weekends. He has an amazing relationship with my daughter and treats her like his own. When he's over, it feels like the things that are in my flat are somewhat appeased, I guess. My daughter doesn't wake up at all as well, and every night that my boyfriend leaves, she's a scream machine again. She hasn't known him for long at all and isn't very attached to him or anything either, so that strikes out the possibility of missing him, as well as the fact that this happens Sunday to Thursday every night. My mum and I loosely theorized that this thing in my house was created by some residual energy from the previous single mum. I have heard that there's a name for that kind of entity, but I can't remember what the name of it is. Other things I've experienced too are something calling my nickname, and when I go looking, nobody is ever there. Foul smells that are honestly just horrible. Things just go missing and reappear in weird places, mostly religious stuff as well. Knocks all over the place. I forgot to add too that when I pick my daughter up from her cot, which is right next to my bed, she starts looking around like frantically and hyperventilates for like minutes afterward. So, if you've experienced anything like this and know of what I can do about it without actually contacting whatever is in this place, then please do let me know, because sincerely, I am a drained, tired mother and I need some help. My father lived with us for a while, 6 months prior to passing away, in fact. Long story short, my father was a drug addict who became violent and had to be forced from our home. This led to us not speaking to him for the last few months of his life. He didn't pass away peacefully. Since his death, my family has experienced 3 more losses. Our home has become a place of constant sadness and negative energy. The last few months, we've been experiencing some strange happenings too. So, my father installed our ceiling fan, and it had always turned itself on sporadically. After his passing, it started happening at least once a day, turning on full blast, in conjunction with the TV turning on as well. My father put a small screw in the back of the remote to keep the battery cover on. I would set the remote down on the table, turn my back, and then the TV and the fan would turn on. Sometimes it would take me turning the TV off several times for it to stay off as well. This stopped happening after my mum cancelled cable and returned the remote to the provider. The ceiling fan also went back to only turning on sometimes, and I know that this could easily be explained as electrical or wiring issues, but I just bring it up because maybe it's related. In any case, we have my father's ashes on top of the china cabinet, and we had some photos of him around it. The photos kept falling off with no explanation. My mum took the photos down after a framed picture of her and him fell and shattered, ruining the photo. He found the photo in storage shortly before he was removed from our home, in fact. When my partner and I are home alone, we've also both heard cabinet drawers slamming. The front and the back doors sometimes slam as well, and what sounds like a drawer opening and being rummaged through then slams shut as well. Chairs can be heard being pushed in and out, but when investigated, nobody is ever there. The cats and the dog will be asleep in another room or where in our sight, and several times when I've showered while home alone, I'll hear voices in the house, and they seem to react to this. I keep seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye too, and the other day I briefly saw a brown outline of a person in my kitchen. This didn't happen prior to my father's passing, mind you, which is why I give all this context. But yesterday was my aunt's funeral. She passed young and suddenly. We have all taken it kind of hard, I guess, but last night my partner and I were sitting on the back porch for a few hours just talking. And as I was mid-sentence, we suddenly heard footsteps and what sounded like a loud growling sound that was getting closer. We both immediately got up and ran inside because we felt this primordial sense that I was in danger. It made my heart beat fast and my hair stand up on the back of my neck. I didn't see anything after looking around 10 minutes later. The growl also sounded like it came from a human. But the yard is fenced in, and the gate on the side of the yard, the noise that comes from it when you unlock it, it's pretty much impossible to miss. And the other gate was in view of us, so if someone had jumped the fence, we would have heard it. We were outside for 2 hours, and my dog had been out with us as well. If a person had been out there, then she would have ran up to them for sure as well. If it had been an animal, she would have been trying to run at it or alert us to it for sure. She's a hunting breed and has done so before. But we talked to my mum, and she's had a similar experience in the yard as well. We can't figure out what it could be, can't think of a plausible explanation, but something tells me that all of this is somehow related. This happened around 2018, right after my sister and I moved out of our apartment together. It's been bothering me since I just moved out. I was home alone on my day off when someone knocked on my door. No one ever visits, and I have anxiety, so that was terrifying to my brain already. But I answered, and it was a woman who lived in one of the basement apartments. She seemed nice at first, asking if I wanted my clothes that she was giving away because they weren't her style but supposedly matched mine perfectly as a young woman. That was already a bit of a red flag in my mind, because the only time that I ever saw her was when I was walking to work, wearing my uniform of a black shirt, black pants, and black hat. But I let her talk because, well, I'm super awkward and hated being rude to technical strangers. Then she started getting pushy and listing off super expensive name brands to try to get me to go to her apartment. It's an old small building, no cameras, and I lived on the second and top floor, which would be down what I called the creepy stairs and next to the door to the back lot that nobody used. When I realized that she was holding a notebook open with a script of what to say, I continued to reject, but my anxiety wouldn't let me close the door on her face without fear of her lashing out. She kept insisting until I finally told her that my boyfriend was going to be home soon and suggested that she donated them. My boyfriend wasn't going to be home for many, many hours, but she didn't need to know that, obviously. She leaves and I go back to my room, which has a window facing that back lot or alley. A few moments later, I hear a fight happening in the lot and see her with the previous, he was already fired at that point, maintenance man. It's a loud, screaming fight, and they're standing next to his truck, which has tinted windows and a covered truck bed. My paranoia went a little wild, so I texted my family about it, just to feel a bit safer. Then I believe that he left, but a little while later, something hits my door hard. I didn't check, just sort of stared. Then it happened again and again, all night until my boyfriend came home, and for a few days when I was alone. I found out after looking at the door that they were hitting my deadbolt, and it was off center. Even after it was replaced, the damage just couldn't be fixed. It stopped after a little while, and the woman moved out almost immediately after all of that. I don't want to feed my paranoia, but something obviously just wasn't right. I know that I should have called the police, but I have horrific phone anxiety. Everyone thought that I was overreacting too, and police in my town are relatively useless anyway. Also, that maintenance man was rehired and was the one who replaced my deadbolt, insisting that he kept the extra key, despite never needing the old. Thankfully, my new house is much safer. The bedroom that I used to have for most of my life, living with my parents, has had quite an extensive lot of bizarre or unexplained happenings. The most puzzling, though, is that it seems to be causing sleep paralysis in whoever sleeps there. Note that all smoke or gas detectors of the house have always been functional. The house has no gas line or indoor garage, doesn't have mold or other toxic things or hallucinogens. I and anyone else mentioned here have no history of mental illness or other health conditions, anything susceptible of causing such things as well. None of us take any medication with no such side effects, don't use any drugs, and was not at any point under the influence of alcohol or other substances. In other words, I've racked my brain over everything that could have been causing this, and there just really isn't anything that can explain it. Anyways, I first noticed the phenomenon when I was a young teen. It didn't happen very often at first, but as I grew older, it happened more often, up to every other night. I would wake up, usually at night or early morning, fully unable to move. I couldn't talk, couldn't move my eyes even, and the harder that I tried to move, the more it felt like my body was, like vibrating or buzzing, with proportionally louder rumbling noise in my ears. I have tinnitus, and this definitely wasn't that. For the longest time, I wouldn't fight it and just let myself fall back to sleep. I learned about sleep paralysis when I was about 17 or 18 because of this, and it seemed like a good enough scientific explanation for me. That was until I moved to another bedroom inside the same house. You see, at age 21, we decided to move my bed to my father's previous bedroom in the basement, and I instantly stopped having those sleep paralysis episodes. I think that's when I realized that these weren't as normal as I thought that they were. I mean, if I did suffer from the condition, it wouldn't matter where I slept, wouldn't it? In fact, I never had one single episode anywhere other than that one in that specific bedroom. Not once in any other room in the same house even. Not once in any other room that I've had since moving out, in any of my previous apartments, nor in my current house. It's been almost 15 years since, and yet to this day, if I happen to try and take a nap in that specific bedroom when I'm visiting my parents, half of the time it will cause sleep paralysis. It also doesn't matter what time of day or night it is. I've even had it happen in broad daylight just last week. And it's gotten worse too. I don't even need to be near sleep. Sometimes all it takes is for me to just close my eyes and the paralysis hits instantly, but always only in that one specific room and nowhere else. My mum now sleeps in that room. I've told her several times about these experiences, and she always avoids the subject. I also told my significant other. He decided too that he would like to try and take a nap in that room out of curiosity. He has never had a single episode of sleep paralysis in his entire life, mind you, and did not even know it existed until I told him about it. But a few weeks ago, he had the opportunity to try it. He said that he felt observed the moment that he stepped into that room, but brushed the feeling off. And yes, he did experience paralysis for the first time ever, right there in that room. He couldn't sleep at all, and it only went away suddenly when I walked past the bedroom door on my way to the bathroom. He shot up and left the room, visibly shaken, and thanked me for passing by, saying that he felt really trapped and couldn't seem to break free. Now, this guy sleeps like a snoring dead log. It takes a lot of noise to wake him up, and me just walking by really shouldn't have been enough. So I know for a fact that he wasn't asleep. He also has taken naps at my parents' house before, though not in that one room, and never had any other issues either. I don't know what it is about that room, but there just seems to be something really off. This story comes from Belgium and took place in 2020 during COVID confinements. I was 20 back then, and at that time, because of the severity of the pandemic in Belgium, the law stated that you could only go out to practice sports or to work, so I took the habit of meeting with a friend, Sully, to go out for runs and to practice all kinds of sports in general. Both of us were quite fond of urban exploration and knew a spot in the outskirts of Brussels consisting of an old sports and wellness centre where we took the habit to hang out after our runs at. To get into this spot, You have to go through a hole in a fence on a street, cross a small portion of woods, and you'll come up on a football pitch and tennis court, and up on a hill is the center, which is an old 4-story building. The whole center takes a whole street block pretty much. On that day, we had just finished a 5-kilometer run and went out to our spot as usual. We were walking to the building since it was about to rain when we saw 2 teenagers sitting on the roof edge, and I remember thinking that it bothered me since we were planning to go to the roof as well. So we went to the hall area instead to wait for a bit, in hopes that those guys would leave. In the hall area, you sort of have a clear view into the kitchen, which you have to go through if you want to go to the roof. You can also see into another smaller hall and into the dining room as well. Sully was rolling himself a cigarette whilst I was sort of gathering 2 chairs and an office table for us to sit at. And this next part, it honestly gives me chills when I think about it. So as I finished setting everything up, I remember starting to feel a little unwell for some reason. Like I was being watched or something, and not in a good way. That's when I looked at the kitchen and saw, for a brief moment, a head sticking out of the doorframe and staring right at us. It was a man. I couldn't say what age he was since he was all dirty, but the one thing that I remember is that he had a really exaggerated happy expression on his face, like he had just found exactly what he was looking for. At that moment, I just froze and was unable to react bravely to the situation. I sort of leaned slowly towards Sully, all whilst keeping eye contact with the man, and told him very calmly that we had to go immediately. I tend to make lots of jokes to all of my friends, and especially to Sully, but when he saw the look that I had on my face when I told him that we had to leave, he didn't say a word, just took his backpack and stood up. We ran to the football pitch and saw that the 2 teenagers, they were still on the roof, so we started to yell at them asking if the man was with them or if they saw him, but they answered that no, they hadn't seen anyone and they had come by themselves, so if someone was there, he wasn't with them. We told them that it was probably better for them to leave as well, since we didn't know what the man in the lobby was up to. They told us that they would be fine and that they would leave a bit after. We decided to leave since we already told them what we saw, and we also had been out pretty long at this point. It wasn't actually legal with confinement rules for us to be out this long as well. And as we were walking towards the woods, I turned back and I swear that I saw a silhouette standing in front of the staircase leading to the roof, but my mind didn't quite react and I just left alongside with my friend. I guess I was so shocked because nothing like this had ever happened to me before that I just decided not to talk about it to anyone in fear of them not believing me or possibly making fun of me, I guess. My friend Sully is the only one who was with me that day, and he didn't take a look at that man, but he is pretty much as scared as I was, just by seeing my own reaction at that time. I don't know what happened to those teenagers, but I did eventually find local articles and papers dating from that time about teenagers being chased by a crazy man in an abandoned building, but the information given wasn't enough for me to be sure that it was the same people and even the same story. All I know is what I saw, and to be honest, I'm grateful that I did see it, because if I hadn't, I shudder to think what may have happened. In 1991, my mother was killed in a tragic auto pedestrian accident. Funeral arrangements were made, family gathered in the city where she lived, and we all returned home and carried on. About a month later, I was sleeping at home when the phone rang, about 3 a.m. I had to get up to answer it, as the only phone was in the kitchen. There was a lot of static on the line, and then, amazingly, I heard my mother's voice. She had a very distinctive voice. She sounded like Lucille Ball, so I could tell who it was immediately. I was so shocked I just couldn't make any sense of it. I remember that I said, "Mother, where are you?" All kinds of things were going through my mind. Was there maybe a case of mistaken identity? Was she not dead, but maybe just hurt instead, and couldn't remember anything? She seemed very confused and sort of frustrated. Wouldn't answer any of my questions, but kept saying that she had to find June. She had lived on a road called Lake June Road, so I thought that that was what she meant. I was frantically trying to get her to say where she was, telling her that I wanted to help her, but after mentioning June a couple of more times, there was more static, and then the line went dead. I sat in the dark for a long time, wondering what to do and what the heck had just happened, and if possibly I'd imagined the whole thing. Finally, it was time to go to work, and I got ready and went. When I got to work, my dear friend and co-worker were a little bit late that morning too. When she arrived, she told me that she had a really bad night, and I said, "Tell me about it, you and me both." Then my face went white, and my hair stood on end, as she told me, "Yeah, last night at about 3, my Aunt June passed away." This happened many years ago now, when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I wouldn't describe the area that I was in as backwoods necessarily, but it was a wooded 100-plus acre ranch. The land is in the southwest part of the United States. My family owns the property, and we have family reunions every year and all stay for about 5 days to camp. There's an area of the ranch too where we all set up camp and cook and eat. Getting to that part of the ranch requires driving through a small village and several gates for about 2 miles. The first gate beyond the village is slightly past a set of railroad tracks, and while that's a bit of a description, I admit, it is relevant later in the story. Now, because I had been camping at the ranch for as long as I really could remember, and the land was private, my parents would allow me to go off on my own during the day, as long as I didn't go too far. I'd spend time walking the property near our camp area, looking for arrowheads or trying to catch tadpoles in the ponds, stuff like that. On this day, I left the large camp area after lunch, which was around 11:30, and told my mum that I was going to a nearby creek. I planned on catching some tadpoles to bring back to the camp and be back on time for a swimming trip my cousins were planning. They wanted to go to a nearby river, and I really didn't want to miss it. I made it down to the creek and got several tadpoles. I probably spent a total of 15 minutes down there, I would guess. To get back to camp, I would have needed to either climb up a relatively steep embankment with a lot of loose rock or circle around on a longer route with a flat trail. I would usually go up the embankment, but I didn't have a top for the water bottle that I caught the tadpoles with, and I didn't want to risk slipping and spilling them out and killing them. I had never walked the longer trail by myself, mind you, but I had with my dad and felt confident that I could find my way back to the camp. Anyway, as I walked back to the camp, I had my head down just looking for arrowheads in the washed out areas of the trail, when I started feeling a little creeped out as I continued walking. We all know that feeling like someone is watching you. It was unsettling, but I chalked it up to just getting spooked or being on a trail by myself or whatever. Now, the next part I cannot explain, because it's as if a light switch just turned on or someone snapped their fingers and I came back to reality. Except when I came to, I was no longer on the trail that I had been on before. I was now near the railroad tracks and it was completely dark. My mum was standing in front of me, shaking my shoulders and yelling, "Where were you?" 2 things I remember really clearly about the moment I came to are, 1, the look of fear, anger, relief in my mum's tearful eyes as she was yelling at me, and 2, the confusion that I felt about what the heck was going on. I mean, the last thing I remembered was just walking on the trail back to the camp, and now suddenly it was dark and I was at the railroad tracks leading to the ranch, which was over 2 miles away. The best that I can describe it is to compare it to the movie The Butterfly Effect. The main character would be living in one moment, then suddenly he'd just wake up somewhere entirely different. In any case, my parents drove me back to the camp and I learned that it was 10:30 p.m. This meant that I'd been gone for 11 hours, about 10 and a half of which I cannot account for to this day. My parents and all of my family had understandably freaked out when I hadn't returned to the camp. They had been looking for me all day. I was a really good kid though growing up and almost never broke any rules, so my parents were baffled at my behavior that day. I tried to explain to them that I really had no memory of getting to the tracks, but they didn't believe me. They thought maybe I just got lost and was too embarrassed to admit it. This was the only time that I've ever experienced something like this, and I cannot explain just how unsettling it is to not be able to account for all of those hours that I was gone. Was it coincidence that I had that sort of creeped out feeling on the trail and then just lost 10 and a half hours of my life like that? I wish I had answers for what happened, but honestly I really don't know if I ever will, which is why I'm here. Have any of you ever had anything similar happen? And if you have, then I would love to hear it.